Please.
Attention! Attention! You are listening to a pre-recorded episode of The Curious Realm. Curious Realm is busy traveling the vast void of time and space to find the best paradigm-changing content the universe has to offer. Enjoy the following transmission, and remember, stay curious, curious, curious. Coming to you from the City of the Weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Curious Realm coverage of the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, the Bigfoot Capitol of Texas. We have with us right now Jason Mclean. How you been, man?
So far, so good, man. Appreciate you coming out.
The author of Metroplex Monsters. We have had him on before talking about pterosaurs, other cryptids in Texas. I always love seeing you here at the shows. You've always got a vendor table set up. Tell us a little bit about some of the recent research you've been doing, things like that, man.
So we've been actually spending a lot of time out in Thackerville, Brown Springs. It's, start off more as a Sasquatch area, and we've had daytime sightings there, right? However, it became very, very apparent that there was a high supernatural presence there, and so one of the things that's helped us do is actually sort of realize that there is a distinct separation between the two. So one of the big things we're talking about in the channel now on Texas Front Porch is that everyone wants to either be, it's like they're an aper or they're into the woo side, which, by the way, if you're a paranormal Bigfooter, come up with something different, because woo is, it's like that only Ric Flair should be able to get away with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But, yeah. What I think is really happening is people are fighting over the name, right? They're Bigfoot and Sasquatch. It's like, why don't we open that box back up and say, why don't we actually look at what's being observed? What are people actually coming across? What are they running across? What are they reporting? And you start noticing very distinct patterns that at least indicate that perhaps what we're looking at is two different phenomena. One is a naturally existing creature. Again, this is the hypothesis. And then the other is a paranormal entity. Right, or rather, probably even a range of phenomena.
And I believe it was you that I had on that we were talking about. Is specifically the paranormal side?
Yes.
Is it the fact that it is Bigfoot, or is it the fact that it is something else that is actively using what we are comfortable with and okay with accepting?
Yeah, no, exactly. One of the examples I use is if you wake up and you open your tent and there's this giant dark figure with red glowing eyes, not eye shine, self-luminous eyes. It's Bigfoot. You do it, and you wake up in your bed in your home. It's a demon or a shadow person or etc. It's the same phenomena, just seen in two different locations, going by two different names.
Yeah.
So either we are putting that on it, or it is deciding to change its appearance to make us more comfortable with it. And maybe even to hide what it really is. Because once it becomes Bigfoot, we're like, oh, it's a Bigfoot, and we move on. We don't realize that there's this other aspect to it, which does open a whole host of questions.
Absolutely. But to begin with, the paranormal side of Bigfoot opens a whole host of questions. There's a host of questions to a biological side.
Yes.
Is there, and a lot of people think, I've even been guilty of saying it, that
the paranormal side, a lot of the shows, things like that focus on that, kind of pull away from some of the actual hard physical research going on, which may be the case. But at the same time, I think that it is important for us to look at both sides of this phenomena, because even with the biological sightings of Bigfoot, things like that, there have been, the only way to explain it is paranormal happenings in the same location. Be they UFO sightings, portals, what have you.
Well, and Thackerville is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Where we have both sort of seemingly observed at the same time. So let me put this giant caveat, one giant asterisk on the entire hypothesis, right, that there is a natural existing phenomena. We don't know if if a paranormal entity takes physical form. We don't know what kind of evidence it would leave. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, we'd have to be able to prove paranormal to begin with.
Exactly. And so it's like, I've got, again, Metroplex monsters, Dallas demons, Fort Worth goatmen, and other terrors of the Trinity River. I've got an account of a lechuza that is clearly impacting the physical world.
Lechuza, just for our audience that is not aware of the phenomenon.
Right. So think of a harpy from the Greek legends. Yeah. Essentially, it's a human-sized owl, but the face of a woman. That's the lechuza is sort of the Hispanic name for it. It's from Latin America. There's other versions, but again, easiest would be the harpies of the Greeks, right? But this thing was clearly physically interacting with the natural world, but it was clearly not a natural creature. The rest of the story shows that this is a paranormal entity. And again, the situation, it's a paranormal entity.
Much like Mothman, things like that.
Right, exactly. And so it's like, well, here's a paranormal creature interacting with the physical world. The Bible talks about angels taking physical form, eating, doing things, the watchers creating the Nephilim. So the question becomes with the natural Bigfoot, my big giant caveat to all this is we don't have a body. And honestly, we have the Sasquatch albivernix tests coming probably the next year.
Sure.
Right?
Got a presentation about it going on as we speak.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Shelly Covington-Montana has done a lot of fabulous work on this. Doug Hychek as well. So this is one of those things where I think when these tests come back, we're going to know one way or the other, because the question becomes, okay, this skin oil is either skin oil with DNA in it and in a specific chemical composition, or it's another material, right? And the problem is if it becomes another material, then we got a whole other set of questions.
Absolutely.
The question becomes, if a paranormal entity can take physical form, what kind of evidence would it leave? And that's a question that we don't really have answered. We don't have a good response to that. So I think within the next 5 years, we're going to have either better evidence for there being a physical Sasquatch, a naturally existing Sasquatch, or we're going to have to start facing some really hard questions. Now, I still, like you said, that's my caveat, is I'm still working from that hypothesis. So once these other tests come in, I think we will find that there is a naturally existing Bigfoot. But I think we need to also not get rid of the paranormal aspect.
Yeah, we can't really close the door on those questions.
Nor should we.
Once again, even if the physical evidence proves an animal, we still have to find out the phenomenology of the background and what else was going on at that time.
Right, because there's this other question, and I think we've done a disservice to, like, the native lore on this.
Absolutely.
Because if you look at the native lore and you compare it to other, like, lore of the Fae from Europe or the Oni of Japan, you start seeing very specific overlaps that you can't just say, oh, well, people come up with the same ideas, right? It's like, yeah, that goes so far. But when you see very similar overlaps, again, the Lechuza and the Harpy are a great example. The Goatman and Pan, or the Leshy of Indo-Russia, or the Shahadim of the Hebrew. Like, there's clearly this paranormal phenomena that is occurring all around the world, and people are interacting with it. We see it with Bigfoot. There was a tribe in Alaska who's, again, I'm terrible with names, but they talk about how you're not supposed to eat salmon that a Sasquatch gives you, because if you do, you stay in their world. Well, that's identical to fairy lore that we see in Europe, where it's, if you eat their food, you stay in their world. And you start seeing, again, very similar overlaps with the UFO phenomena, right, where time doesn't work the same way. They seem to be shapeshifters. So it's like the problem is there's this larger paranormal entity or phenomena that it's like well, you can either do one or both. It's like, no, maybe the world's more complicated than that.
Well, and we've had conversations with quite a few MUFON researchers, stuff like that. Kathleen Martin specifically, Sev Talk, and the idea that abductions, that kind of stuff, have started taking on a more paranormal quality, and even those that have experienced abduction or close encounter have begun having more paranormal experiences.
Right.
And this is like notated in the research, things like that.
For a long time.
And it's really interesting to see them making that correlation right now. Even experiencers coming back from their experience with healing qualities, the ability to ESP, things like that. It's pretty remarkable. Now, when it comes to Bigfoot, things like that, have you noticed over the last few years an increase in sightings, including paranormal?
I think it's more that people are willing to come out and talk about it. Okay. Because if you really look, it's always sort of been there. It just used to be called the Fae, or it was something else, right? Angels, demons. But that's why I really think that the Bigfoot nomenclature has been put on this deliberately. That this paranormal phenomenon is trying to mask itself as Bigfoot, because then we just say, oh, it's Bigfoot, and we move on.
Sure.
We don't really recognize it for what it is, and I think that's definitely part of the phenomena. Now, again, the UFO phenomenon is a thing unto itself, and I do think that honestly, I think the CIA and the DoD are playing a much larger role in how that's being handled. So we'll put that to the side. But like the paranormal aspect of the UFO phenomena is also so closely connected to, again, like elvish lore, like the lore of the Fae and those kinds of things, and not just the Fae. That's sort of a catch-all term. It's in line with a ton of different traditions, and so the question becomes: maybe this phenomena is, we tend to say, well, maybe it's trying to hide itself, and I think that's a good possibility. But maybe it's also that we are creating what these things look like by our expectations.
Well, like we were saying, the entity that is appearing as these paranormal Bigfoot is definitely using our own impression of what we are looking for, what we are out there for, what we are the experience that we are open to.
Oh, yes.
And using that to its advantage.
Yeah.
Now, where do you fall in the camp? Because a minute ago you mentioned the CIA, alphabet agencies, things like that. Where do you fall in the idea that they have a part in covering up Bigfoot? There has been, over the last many years, a going hypothesis that the government is fully aware of Bigfoot. Right. They're cool with Bigfoot. That's why it's a protected species in Oregon. But that they know that they're out in the national parks and that they are hiding the fact.
That's a great question. I'm ambivalent is not the right word. I would say I'm kind of 50-50 on how much, because I think there's this thing where we assume everything's either the government is hyper competent and does everything very deliberately, when sometimes it's just they don't know what to do with something, and it's like, well, why don't we just leave this alone and not talk about it? And also create a culture of, if you talk about this, then you're crazy, you're an idiot, right?
Sure.
They have a mainstream narrative that they want to push, and so it's less. So maybe a lot of this it's less cover up and more they don't want to deal with this because it isn't part of a narrative that they enjoy talking about. And so it's like, we'll just shun those people, so it becomes unpopular to talk. Again, my encounter with the pterosaur, I knew I couldn't talk about it. Yeah. And I believe these things were still alive in Texas, but it's just so far south. I'm like, they couldn't be around Dallas, Texas, right? I knew Ken Gerhardt for years before I talked about it. So that, shame is a real phenomenon.
Oh, absolutely.
And that peer pressure will keep people silent.
Yeah.
So I think
it's really a self-regulating system.
Correct. Now, that being said, am I going to sit here and say with ontological certitude that the government isn't hiding these things deliberately?
No.
Oh, I'm certainly not about to say that.
No.
Because maybe they are, right?
Who knows?
I think it may be just be like, again, for me, everything's a pie, obviously. But, it just depends on how large a slice of the pie it is, right? How much of this is the government actually knowing what's going on and saying, we need to hide this because it absolutely goes against whatever narrative that they find to be most politically convenient.
Yeah.
And that may be a tiny sliver, maybe 90% of the pie. And then the rest of it is we'll just create this culture of shame because we want this very atheistic Darwinian viewpoint, because to them, that's more advantageous.
Sure.
Right? Because think about it. It's, well, this is, again, the phrase, the science, that's become its own, that's not science. If you say the science, that's not science. That's religion.
Science is admitting you know about 70%.
Yeah.
And the rest we'll figure out along the way. And our 70% may utterly change because of that 30%.
Exactly.
And we're okay with that.
Right. And that's the thing is with science is we get new technology. The science helps us build new technology. That new technology shows us things we didn't know, and then we have to change the science so we keep growing. That's how it's supposed to be seen. Yeah. And the problem is anyone who steps outside this very narrow window of exploration, you stop being a scientist and you become a florist. You stop becoming an archaeologist and you become a shoemaker. And
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because here in the last year since we met, I've been to the International Remote Viewing Association, International Association of Near-Death Studies Conference, MUFON, things like that. And there are some contiguous names throughout that, and people that research in all of those fields. Now, for instance, Robert Bigelow, Hal Puthoff, things like that. And I had somebody here recently in my group mention the fact that they love one guest that I have, but they don't like the other guest because he doesn't say as much as the other one. And I'm like, okay, well, you have to remember at one point guest B was actually read on to stuff.
Yeah.
He actively worked at a lab for the U.S. government and wrote algorithms and things like that. So there are things that he literally cannot talk about.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about people in the range of Hal Puthoff, that kind of stuff, I literally put forth the fact that when these strange new sciences come up, they just read them onto it.
Yeah.
Because now you got to keep your mouth shut. And we can talk about it behind closed doors and how it relates to Bigfoot, how it relates to UAPs, how it relates to electric vehicles and how we can monetize it, whatever.
Right.
But now you're read on and you can't go out and talk to Time Magazine.
Yes. Exactly.
And they literally keep these people inside this insular system and read them on to all of these topics.
Exactly.
So even if it's the fact of they're researching portals at Skinwalker Ranch and a thing pops out of it and walks by and goes into another portal.
Yeah.
And this is a report from more than one person on that research team.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, now we're talking about portals with Bigfoot.
Yep.
Now so
look at Nick Redfern talked about this for years ago, that he had, again, anytime it's a government whistleblower, you kind of have to just say, okay, let's keep it at arm's length. It's interesting data, but you can't say it 100%. But they were talking about how at Area 51 that they were using Babylonian practices to communicate with the aliens, right? And that's like, well, what's going on there? Like, what the heck is that? Now, is it real?
Stargate type stuff.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's weird. Again, maybe it's disinformation, right? But there is this, we can't reject the occult connection with advanced technology.
Absolutely.
Right? Obviously, the big one is Jack Parsons, and then I just forgot his name, the rocket scientist from the Nazi rocket scientist we brought over. Oh, my gosh.
I just blanked on it, too.
Yeah,
my God, Project Paperclip.
Yeah, exactly.
Von
Braun.
Yeah, Von Braun.
Von Braun.
I just said Goddard. It's not Goddard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Von Braun. Well, it's like Von Braun. What? Again, there's the question, well, how Nazi was he? It's like, well, he was Nazi enough to not get killed. Like, that's the thing.
Nazi enough to be given a lot of money for research.
Exactly. Precisely. And we know that he was dabbling in the occult when he was there. And that comes over here. Jack Parsons, intimately connected to the occult. We see this tradition today with CERN. Like, it's art projects. I'm sorry. What kind of? These are not art projects. These are
really wild art projects.
Yeah, it's like, and of course, it's like, oh well, what about this? I use the word in quotation, mock sacrifice that happened like last year. We're like, oh, just some of our scientists were just pulling a prank.
Yeah.
Who performs a mock sacrifice as a prank? And let's pretend it was a mock sacrifice for just a moment.
I mean, cremation of care.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like, don't get me wrong. Okay, fine. Let's say no one actually died. Okay,
sure.
I'll give you that.
Sure.
I
Is the intent still not there?
Right. It's like, is this not weird enough on its own? And again,
it's kind of why I don't play with Ouija boards, even if it's a game on a Saturday night. It is about the intent of the actions. And guess what? You don't need the Ouija board.
Yeah.
There's the frightening part. All you need is the intent.
Oh, you want a good story on Ouija boards? Go talk to Bob, my friend over at Van Buren Varieties. He has a really intense story because and that's one of those things where you open up.
I don't even want one in my house, and I really want a vintage Ouija board.
It's like it's an occult device, and that's the thing. And again, I'm not sold that someone wasn't actually sacrificed at CERN. It's like, who was this person, and can we do a side-by-side comparison?
Yeah.
Do you have them walking around?
There's even the whole hypothesis that the whole guise of the first Gulf War was for us to go and actively take technology, Babylonian technology from Saddam Hussein, Stargate technology, things like that.
I don't even necessarily think it's technology. I think it is clearly paranormal.
Knowledge is technology.
Yeah.
Knowledge is technology.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Yeah, I like that. But the simple fact is we can't separate this deep occult with this high technology. No. We can't separate people talking about speaking with these other beings and high technology. And the fact that we keep seeing these weird, bizarre rituals happening, like, oh, they're art projects. No, stop that. Yeah. An art project, like, I know what an art project looks like. I'm an artist. These are not art projects. Y'all are performing things, because I know what that looks like too.
Yeah, that's still performance art, but it's still
Yeah, and so it's like we can't separate these two, and I think there's a bigger story there.
Absolutely.
That again, we have a narrative, right? I was talking about the narrative that the government wants, which is a very purely atheistic Darwinian perspective, and that's the only. Think about that. You can teach that in school.
So what do you think will happen to, I guess, the paradigm then of Bigfoot research when they are provided with that Darwinian research? Right. You know, things like right now we've got scientists looking at footprints and actively showing like, no, this ain't fake. Like, here's the ridge lines. Here's like, this is an actual thing. And these are, they aren't fringe scientists. They are like mainstream biologists and things like that. You may not hear it on Bigfoot encounters or things like that regularly.
Yeah, no. So again, I think that's important, right? Because there's a difference between they're looking at the biological reality, right? Whatever their perspective is, they're looking at objective reality, and I'm groovy with that. We should look at that because, like I said, my caveat is I think there is a natural Bigfoot that exists. But I think that's a very, very small population. Mm-hmm. I think the problem is we're seeing this other paranormal stuff that either because we want it to be or it wants us to think it is, it's getting lumped in with the Bigfoot. We need to separate those two things out. Again, whatever your perspective is, as long as we're looking at objective material, groovy. Come with whatever perspective you want, whether you're a creationist or you're an atheist, I don't care, right? As long as we can look at it and talk about it openly and honestly, I'm down for the conversation. The problem is the conversation has been either you're an aper or you're into the woo. And I think we need to say, hold up, let's break this box apart and let's look at the actual phenomena each time and start seeing larger patterns. Yes. And once you do that, you start noticing there is this other world that the mainstream wants us to not look at that way when it's clearly got a connection. All I'm saying is let's look at all things openly and honestly with transparency and just tell us what your biases are so we can put that into the mix as well.
Well, and you have to admit that you have your biases, you know? I mean, that's one big reason I harp on it all the time on the show. If you're out doing paranormal research, don't hit stop and rewind.
Yeah.
Don't hit stop and rewind on set.
Yes.
Like, even whenever I worked with bands, I would give them their CD at the end of the night and tell them, listen to that Sunday.
Yeah.
Like, listen to that at your next rehearsal. Give it 3 or 4 days before, because otherwise you will literally pick yourself and your performance apart.
Yeah.
And not in the right way.
Correct.
Not in like the football footage way that you're supposed to be doing it.
Precisely. And that's this big thing, right? And this other problem is this sanitizing of information where
absolutely.
You know, whether it's MUFON, BFRO, and every other organization I've met, right? All of them. It's, well, here's the parts of the stories we like and here's the stuff we don't like and we get rid of them. And I'm just saying let's put all the stories out there openly so we can, because again, I say with my caveat that if there is a natural Bigfoot, that's a hypothesis that I have, and I may be wrong, Like I said, I think in the next 5 years we're going to know whether there is one or not. Honestly, because we're getting to that point where, particularly with the Sasquatch albivernix, whatever comes back on that, I think is going to really shape this argument moving forward. Because, like I said,
especially with the new lifting of oil prints, things like that in the last few years, that kind of stuff.
No, exactly. Because
even the work that was put forth in Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed,
exactly,
phenomenal
good
information.
Science. Again, it's not the science; it's good science, right? Again, the problem is we don't have the Spookatron 5000 to be able to properly, objectively observe paranormal phenomena, right? So we have to understand that there's a line there. Like there is, we just need to be able to say, okay, here's the paranormal stuff, here's the physical stuff, and maybe these two are intimately connected in ways that we don't fully understand. Maybe it's the same phenomena. But we're not going to be able to know, but maybe they are two separate phenomena.
Maybe one phenomena is attracted to the other.
Exactly. Or maybe what we have is a wolf and a deer. They show up in the same spots, but they're not the same animal.
And like any animal in the wild, they have an acute sense of reality of their surroundings that we do not.
Exactly.
That is woods that they traipse through all the time, and if there is something that is amiss, they are distinctly aware of it.
Right.
Whether it's a deer, a hog, doesn't matter. Something's amiss, and this is not the normal trail I'm going down.
Something is not right.
So
here.
even to think that
we have
perhaps Bigfoot, being a large hominid, would be curious of these things the same way that we are.
Maybe they have some perception of them, and they're like,
guaranteed
hey,
they have a better perception of them.
It's like, let's go hang out with. Again, we'd call them fae or angels or demons or whatever. Like maybe they just recognize them for what they are. So we have basically three avenues but we need to know which one we need to explore.
Absolutely.
We need all of the evidence on the table. That's the only thing I want. I want all evidence on the table, and open and honest and transparent, so we can do good science and actually figure out, see where there are patterns. Where are the patterns diverging in ways we don't expect them to?
Absolutely.
Are they coming together in ways we don't expect them to? That's my only thing. I think we need to really open this box back up and take a better look at it, a more objective view of it, and we kind of need to say, look, this is the perspective I'm coming from, but I want all the information. We got to stop sanitizing. We got to be open to possibilities that maybe we don't like. And worldviews that maybe that we find alien or unfamiliar, and accept and just say, okay, everything's on the table. Let's explore.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time today.
Appreciate you, Chris.
Let everybody know where they can get their copy of Metroplex Monsters. Let them know about Texas Front Porch, all that good stuff.
So again, pretty much anywhere where fine books and trashy rags are sold.
That's it.
Amazon and BarnesNoble.com are probably the easiest ways to find us. But again, you can find me 3 times a week on Texas. I don't know if y'all can see it. Texas Front Porch, TEX' Front Porch on YouTube. I'm live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. We got 6 shows on there, so and we're live twice on Thursday. So if you got something, we probably have something for you. But we have a lot of fun. Come on by, say howdy.
Well, thank you so much for your time. While you're online checking out everything from Texas Front Porch, getting your copy of Metroplex Monsters, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm.
Yes.
That is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can find all of our live coverage from events. Stay tuned right after this, folks. We will have more interviews coming to you from the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, right after this. Okay. And
with the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25-milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com, and the code is CURIOUS7. The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of the Texas Bigfoot Conference here at the Bigfoot Capitol of Texas, Jefferson, Texas. In this segment, we are joined by cryptid researcher and host of the Cryptid Chronicles, Ryan Edwards, out of San Antonio. How you been, my man?
Been doing good.
Fantastic. Last time we saw you, we were actively at the Wonderland UFO Festival in San Antonio. How did that end up for the day?
It ended up pretty good. I know Dan Allen Jones was there. We had a couple of the speakers, and it went pretty well. It was a good turnout.
Nice. Yeah, apparently that's like the third year it's been going on. It's over in the Wonderland of Americas. Really neat little conference. I was really looking forward to checking a few people out and had to leave a little early, but it was great seeing you there.
Yeah.
So how have things been going in your world?
Been going good. Been working on my podcast, been doing my research. Hopefully trying to get my second book out by the end of this year or early next year, trying to get that out as soon as I can.
Great. Well, let the audience see your first book, actually, Cryptids of the World. Great read. Let's start getting into a couple of things here. Out of everything that you did in your book, what was probably your favorite part of research for that?
Probably my favorite part of researching is finding the correlations between like cryptozoological creatures and paleontological animals.
Okay.
Like when you see, like with Bigfoot, okay, there are certain anatomical details in there that show it's a unknown species. It's not just imagination and speculation. There is actual anatomical details and morphological and behavioral that show there is a biological species behind these cryptids. And that's for a lot of them, from Bigfoot to the Yeti to the Nandi bear of Kenya to the Queensland tiger of Australia. A lot of these creatures correlate to known prehistoric species. Interesting.
And, even to consider that, the fact that we have numerous times, ivory bill woodpecker's back. That is one that within at least my lifetime went extinct.
Yes.
And is back. In numbers, not just like, hey, look, there's an ivory-billed woodpecker. Even the coelacanth, that's probably one of the most famous versions of cryptids that have come to be. They were talked about and everything else being seen until they were finally caught off the coast of Africa in a fishing net.
Yes.
So even the recent find of the, I guess, what is it, the long-necked snaky face that they're calling it, the freshwater plesiosaur.
Yes.
That people have hypothesized that is Nessie for years as a plesiosaur that's living in fresh water. They're like, well, plesiosaurs live in salt water.
There's no effort to exist until we find something that correlates to something we've already been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and what are some other examples of that? Because there's quite a few things, even the idea of Bigfoot, Nephilim, giants, that kind of stuff. I hear in the last year we've actively found a dragon man in China, where 7 feet tall, cranium about twice the size of your average human, very much many descriptions of giants, things like that. So,
like Dragon Man, it's a recent. Well, it's based on primarily teeth and the mandible.
Yeah.
But from there, we can speculate on what the rest of this human look like.
Yeah.
And there are many human lineages that diverge off of ours. You have Homo floresiensis of Flores, and down there you have stories of the Ebugogo. What they describe as small, hairy humanoids that catch kids and eat them. Ebugogo means the hungry grandma, pretty much.
Oh, wow.
And then in 2005, we discovered Homo floresiensis on the same island. So how are people referencing an extinct species? Also in parts of Africa, you have a creature called the billy ape. Think of a chimpanzee, but the size of a human. And before that, the natives called an animal called a kulakamba. What people thought it was a mix of gorilla and chimp. They called it the lion killers because it was supposedly so vicious. And then we discovered the billy ape in 2007, this giant chimpanzee that correlates to these indigenous stories.
Interesting. Yeah, and we talk about that regularly on the show, be it Sasquatch, giants, what have you. We really should be looking across the globe at accounts and stories from traditional Aboriginal human beings, mainly because of the fact of, A, they have lived in the region longer than anybody, and many of these traditions are unbroken oral traditions. So even to this day, the Indians of the Pacific Northwest tell their family, like, don't do this with the Sasquatch. Don't do that with the Sasquatch.
Don't whistle at night. Don't go out at night. Things like that.
And not necessarily out of fear, but out of peaceful cooperation.
Respect.
Much like, hey, when a deer comes into the camp, this is what you do. More of a situational awareness of what to do when you're out in the woods. This for them is a known quantitative. It's not a mystery.
It's not an unknown variable. How we see it, how like all culture sees Bigfoot, it's like an unknown. To them, it's just another animal in the woods. But for them, it's also seen as like a people. It's another people in the woods.
Oh, yeah. There are active stories of them trading with Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and acknowledgement that they are an active tribe, according to their teachings. So, we really do need to start looking more toward, I think, a native solution, so to speak.
one thing I look for in cryptids is I look to see if there are indigenous stories of them before white people came into the culture, because that shows me it's more likely. Because once colonists come into an area, the culture automatically gets changed.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, look at the Wendigo, for instance. The Wendigo, the original descriptions was of more like a pale humanoid, like what we call crawlers nowadays.
Yeah.
But once the Europeans went in there, it became more werewolf-like, and became what we now see as like a deer-like animal.
Yeah.
And that's because cultural appropriation and cultural inebriation, it's the mixing of cultures.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to basically take the native story and give it the characteristics of what they know, which of course would have been lycanthropy, things like that from Eastern Europe, all that kind of stuff. So, fully alive in Greece, ancient Rome, all that. So, like you said, to marry the two traditions together and that becoming the story from that point on, we really do responsibly have to take care of that.
Yes.
And I think that kind of brings us to the topic, like we got into with Jason Mclean a little while ago, of the paranormal and cryptids. They have, over the last many decades, really started commingling, not just the communities, but the understandings, the research, the researchers even. Where do you stand on that?
With me, I've never seen cryptozoology as a paranormal science. I just see it as simply science of unknown species.
Sure.
But there is certain paranormal aspects to this field, but with me, I set that aside from true cryptozoology.
Yeah.
These cryptids I like to call neo-cryptids, because a lot of them have only come around the past 30, 40 years. Dogman, for instance.
Prime example.
Only came around in the 1990s, really.
Yeah.
Goatman, that only really started appropriating now in recent 10 years.
Yeah.
These neo-cryptids, or paracryptids I like to call them, it's called another sect of cryptozoology I like to call paracryptozoology.
Yeah.
It's beyond physical unknown species, which is what true cryptozoology is.
Yes. And whether it's the study of indigenous species, like you said, that are known to cultures other than us, what have you, that is the field of actual cryptozoology. And we, not that they're in a paranormal aspect, not that paranormal doesn't occur in conjunction with, but there's a far cry difference between a Sasquatch researcher and somebody researching Mothman.
Yes.
For example. And I'm not saying that Mothman is not an actual physical creature, things like that, but much more in the realm of paranormal than, let's say, like Jersey Devil, whose accounts go back to the 1800s, things like that,
Because, like, how I see it, I come at cryptozoology from very much an evolutionary and adaptation source. A lot of these cryptids are describing morphologies that just truly can't exist in the environment. Like, for instance, Mothman, flying humanoids. When you look at their descriptions, they're describing arms, legs, and wings. Something with a spinal cord and 6 limbs does not exist in modern day. All spinal animals have 4 limbs only. These have 6, so that takes it out of the natural category. And it shows something that's unnatural. What it is, I'm not sure. That's not where my research goes.
Sure, yeah. And, and that's one thing that I love about you is that you are very bounded with what you do. Your research, like you said, is very much in the realm of unknown species, emerging species, things like that, which is far different than paracryptozoology, like you were saying.
Yes.
And now, what research have you had in the world of cryptids here in Texas?
Well, with Texas, I try to talk to as many eyewitnesses here in Texas as I can. But usually, I am based down in San Antonio, so I talk to eyewitnesses there. One big cryptid that's seen here in Texas is the Black Panther phenomenon.
Yep.
These black cats I've seen around Texas. East Texas, West Texas, South, North, see these black cats. And it's interesting because truly what they are is very unknown. A lot of people believe they're just melanistic cougars.
Sure.
But DNA evidence has shown melanism doesn't really occur in cougars, especially not seen So
yeah, it normally occurs in anything with
leopards,
stripes
jaguars.
or spots.
Yes.
You gotta have the black part of your coat to melanize
Yes.
to begin with. I mean, I can express that. I'm melanized. So yeah, and being from Houston, one that always pops to mind for me was jaguarless. Not many people realize that, yes, cougars once roamed the Houston area. I mean, that's why the Houston Cougars are named the Cougars. But there's an interesting animal, the jaguarless, that was and apparently went extinct, but has been seen in great numbers over the last decade.
Yes.
To the point that Texas Parks and Wildlife has started actively acknowledging them ranging again, things like that. So,
like the cougar we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
At one time in San Antonio, people didn't believe they lived there until pets were going missing and people were seeing them climbing over fences.
Yeah.
So then the officials have to say, well, these creatures are coming back into their natural habitats, because like the eastern cougar phenomenon, for instance, a lot of people don't believe the cougars live anywhere east of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
There's cougar sightings there all the time.
Yeah.
It's just not on official paperwork.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you hop into South Florida, things like that. There are absolutely cougars roaming around in the swamps, all that kind of stuff. And even that, interestingly enough, we talk regularly with folks like Ken Gerhardt, things like that, about how sightings actively change regionally. How, especially whenever you get into like the southeastern United States, you're talking much more like skunk ape than you are Bigfoot, things like that. So,
because with me, like when people talk about like skunk ape Bigfoot, they think it's like two different species, or maybe a subspecies of Bigfoot. With me, I don't personally believe it's a subspecies. I believe it's what we call an ecomorph. An ecomorph is the same species, but due to change of environment, they've changed. Like leopards, for instance. Leopards roam from Africa all the way into Europe, parts of Europe, and parts of Asia. The leopards that are indigenous to Europe had longer coats because it was a colder environment. The ones found in Africa are bigger than the ones in India. Are those two different species? No, it's the same species, but changed due to the ecology.
Literally Darwinized to their local climate. And to their local food chain, everything else.
Yes.
And at that point, you're talking about something that may get bigger and bulkier because it's in a colder climate, needs to pack on fat for the winter, things like that. And that's interesting to think of it that way, because I've never really heard another cryptozoologist mention it like that it's really much more of a regional adaptation of the same species than A, different species, or B, a subspecies.
Yes, because subspecies actually, it's very uncommon within ape lineages. Of course, you have like eastern gorillas, mountain gorillas, but technically, genealogically, it's all the same species, but just ecologically different because of different environments.
Yeah.
So if this Bigfoot, like when they talk about there's 7 types of Bigfoot, things like that, primatologically, that doesn't make sense. Because it's either, it's the same species that has evolved different for different environments.
Yeah, gorilla or lowland gorilla.
Yeah.
They're both gorilla.
Yeah.
They're just like adapted for a different region.
Chimpanzees and bonobos, they're technically almost the same species. What happened is a chimpanzee population was separated by the Congo River.
Yep.
One became bonobo, one became chimpanzee. They're only less than one allele different in DNA, just that they changed because of different environments.
Yeah.
Same thing might be occurring here with Sasquatch.
And even socially changed.
Yes.
Socially changed to great effect and to great difference.
Yes, because taking for instance with chimpanzees, the chimpanzees north of the Congo River had to deal with gorillas, so they became a lot more violent. The bonobos south of the Congo didn't have any competition, so they became the bonobos of like very peace-loving, kind of like the hippies or what they call it.
Which is what we see all the time on all the primatology shows, things like that, where the female is in charge of the tribe, of the, I guess, what is it? Not the tribe. The troop, yes. A lot of things are switched and swapped, and even the fact that they have sex for fun, not just for breeding.
Yes.
There are a lot of small things like that are actually pretty major whenever you're talking about animals.
Yes. It's very more almost human-like characteristics.
Yeah.
But for the longest time in primatology, you couldn't use human words. Like,
oh, yeah. I mean, even in college, whenever I was doing psychology, things like that, constantly, I can hear Dr. Churchill in my head all the time in his exact voice. Stop personifying, Chris.
Yeah.
Just because you see the ape doing this doesn't mean that they're doing it for that reason.
Yeah.
That's
like,
what you think.
Yes.
Because that's what you would do.
Yeah, because Jane Goodall was almost left out of academia when she used the word culture with chimpanzees.
Absolutely. Yeah, her research took a long time to come to the table because of things like that. Despite almost a decade of observation in the field, in-depth observation to the point of acceptance into a troop.
Yes.
Where even being gone for a year or so, they would still recognize her.
Yes.
And that's pretty incredible. And like you said, to know that her research was pushed aside for a long time simply for using a terminology that now we are fully aware of.
Yes. Like when we think of, like, for instance, with the Sasquatch phenomenon, a lot of people like to use the word culture with Sasquatch. And some people say, well, because it's culture, it must be a human species. Well, not necessarily. Like, some non-human
there's
species
dog
have
culture.
Yes.
There's dog culture. Like, do you go around and snip butts to say hi?
No,
I don't.
That's
but
their
they
own
do.
behavior sets.
Yeah.
And that's what pretty much the definition of a culture.
Absolutely. Well, there's that. There's the pecking order within a pack of dogs, hierarchies. All of that is sign of culture.
Yes.
Absolutely. And to deny that, I think, is more than diminutive, and also
it's very human centrist.
Well,
we want to seem separated from the natural order.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that. I was actually just having that conversation with my wife the other day, and the fact that we all too often forget that we are just really, really big and complex animals.
Yes.
90% of our reaction to our environment, to everything that we do, is utterly guttural and instinctual, and it takes a lot to fight that.
Like psychologists say we try to go against our natural animalistic urges, but our animalistic urges are still there.
But do we?
Some people do. Some people
don't.
Yeah.
Do we?
A lot of people give into it because we want to see ourselves separate from the natural order from animals. But even Da Vinci said himself, we are just animals. But,
that's it.
But smarter.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. And I mean, when you put it in those terms, it really does make it a lot easier to understand I think the reticent fear that some people have, of the unknown.
Yes.
Because, I mean, take a dog, pop him out somewhere that he ain't familiar. He may freak out for a little while.
It's a little monkey brain reacting.
Absolutely. And you have to be willing to accept that, to be able to, out in the field, set something aside, not let it rent the spare space in your head while you were continuing an investigation.
Yes.
Like, you've got to be as cold and removed from what you are gathering as possible. You know, at least if you're out doing, like, hardcore field research, things like that. If you're taking pictures at a paranormal investigation, you normally aren't like, snap, snap, snap. Ooh, let me see what I got. Yeah. You could quite possibly be reading something into that because of the environment you're in and the ecstatic state you're in.
Yeah, like
everything.
Speaking about that, like that's why like sometimes when I watch like paranormal shows, when they say like, "Oh, listen to this EVP," and they put words over it, I think it's saying this. It's you're already putting in that fear and that bias already in there without people letting them choose what you think it's.
How about you take a blank piece of paper and everybody listen to it and write down what you think it says. Then let's put it in a hat and randomly draw it out and see if we all said the same thing.
It's going to be 5 different things.
But if you go up and you say, you know, I think it says this. What do you think?
And they're going to hear it.
You've already set the framework. Yeah. Like, you've literally set the foundation of decision. Now it's just 60-40 instead of 50-50.
Yes, there's literally a psychological experiment. What they do is they put the word Bill repeatedly. But what they do is they put a picture of Bill Nye, picture of a pill, then picture of something else. And you think it's saying different words.
Yeah.
It's saying the same word, but just because you're seeing that picture, you're going to alter what you hear.
Exactly. We really do experientially have to be very careful with that whenever we are looking at research, whenever we're reading research, even whenever you're reading your book, Jason's book, everything else, you've got to be willing to accept the fact that this is only a point of datum amongst a set of data.
Yes.
And be dispassionate. Don't worry about a point of datum like destroying your paradigm in which you live or anything like that. Just understand that it's one more piece on the Rubik's Cube.
Yes.
You know?
It's one more piece of the puzzle, and you need all those pieces. Even though people have different perspectives, different hypotheses, doesn't necessarily mean everyone's wrong. Everyone could be wrong. You never know. Everyone could be right. You never know.
One of the things we say on the show regularly, feel free to look it up. Until about 500 years ago, it was conspiracy theory that the earth was round.
Yes.
And if you said otherwise, you were burned at the stake, you were driven out of town, you were excommunicated, what have you, till some dude decided to get a ship full of people together that were just crazy enough to sail to the horizon and keep sailing. And then they eventually made it home. But amongst the history of humanity, for the longest jaunt, Earth was flat.
Yes.
And that was science.
Yes.
And that is what was taught.
Geocentrism. We thought we were the center of the universe for the longest time until we realized no, sun is. The sun is the center of our solar system, not even the universe.
Galileo, excommunicated for teaching it.
Yes.
Granted, he was teaching it in the name of the church, which is why. But prime examples of those things that, like, we, until the time that enough people got together who were open of mind, open of heart, and not willing to point a finger and say, burn him, the earth was flat. So we have to be willing to not point a finger at somebody's concept, and remember that in science you're allowed to hypothesize any crazy thing you want. It's through experimentation that we prove or disprove the hypothesis, and then it becomes theory. And then it's still not full-on science. It's still theory, like the theory of evolution. Incomplete. Incomplete.
And that's the thing that, like, I look at with cryptozoology as a science, like basic high school science. You find data, you create a hypothesis, and see if that hypothesis is correct. A lot of people nowadays, they create the hypothesis without correlating evidence.
I just can't stand people saying, I have a theory. Do you have a theory or do you have a hypothesis? Because I'll let you hypothesize anything. But if you say you have a theory, now we need to talk evidence.
And you have evidence, data that's correlated.
That's right. That's right. And
people have that now.
And that's just it. We have, and I think a lot of that has to do with the quote religion of science, and the fact of science. Well, that's science. Well, you know what's funny is my high school astronomy textbook, which I still have. Pluto's a planet. Pluto's not on my son's astrological chart. From NASA of planets, it's not on there. You know, so science is not static. By definition, it cannot be static. It is always in flex. It is always in flex. And the day that you say this is decided upon science, you are walking a fine, fine line of danger. Because that could all be obliterated next week.
It almost becomes propaganda at some point.
Absolutely.
It becomes almost a religion.
And that's why I refer to it as the religion of science. Because there are still those scientists out there that are open of mind, that are open of heart, that are they are the modern Magellans. They're doing it. And then there are the others that just toe the line.
They're stuck in paradigm.
And hey, you know, great. You've written 25 books. Maybe reconsider what you've written. That's okay. You know, Plato said a lot of stuff. He was never unwilling to question what he said. And we need to remember that.
I say it, it's always easier to say you're wrong than you're right. Because once you say you're right, you have to show evidence.
Now you got to back it up, and you got to keep backing it up. So I want to thank you for the time today. Thank you so much. It's always great talking with you. Let the audience know where they can go to keep up with the Cryptid Chronicles, where they can go to buy Cryptids of the World, all that good stuff. Shameless self-promotion time, Ryan.
If you want to go on YouTube and check out the Cryptid Chronicles on YouTube, it's my channel. You can go check out my podcast. Usually in the description down below in the Cryptid Chronicles, I have the cryptidchronicles.net. That's my website. There I have my podcast linked. Also a link to my book. There you can go on to Barnes & Noble, Half Price Books. You can find my book there. The Cryptid Chronicles, it's fairly small right now, but thanks to people like you, you can go there, subscribe, view it. Love it. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today. Once again, everybody, while you were online checking out all the great work from Ryan Edwards and the Cryptid Chronicles, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. That is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can fill out your experiencer form if you have had experience with Bigfoot, cryptids, the paranormal. If you're a targeted individual, stop on by, fill out our form, give us your evidence. You can upload pictures, video, all that kind of good stuff. CuriousRealm.com/story is the link to that. Stay tuned. Right after this, we will be coming back with more coverage from the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in the Bigfoot Capitol of Texas, Jefferson. We'll be right back after this. Okay. And
With the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25-milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com and the code is CURIOUS7. The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at CuriousRealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is CuriousRealm.com/store. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, the Bigfoot Capitol of Texas. We are joined right now with Shelly Covington-Montana. How are you today?
Okay.
Hold on.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
Up around to the front. Yeah.
We got it now? Yeah. Okay. So, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Chris?
Fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation a little while ago. Let's get into a little bit of talk, first off, about Alba Vernix.
Okay.
A lot of the research you've been doing out in the field. And then we'll go into what it is to do research out in the field and how to go about that. So,
sure.
Yeah. How did you get into cryptids? How did you get into Bigfoot research to begin with, Shelly?
Okay. So my husband and I have been married 37 years now. And I've actually known him since I was 13 years old. And at one point in our lives, well, early on in our marriage, he would talk about something that happened to him in East Texas on a hunting trip. And he had gone out to the Angelina National Forest to meet up with another gentleman the next day. And this was in 1983. And he was camping, waiting on his buddy, off-road in this big, giant four-wheel drive. You know, back in the 80s, we had the giant ones, you know.
Bigfoot,
that's what they were called, right. And he was sleeping under the tailgate or laying under his tailgate with his sleeping bag next to his fire. And he would talk about something circling his camp in the wood line, breaking things. And he was trying to go over in his head, you know, is that a cow? There shouldn't be a cow out here in the National Forest. And he said the second time it came around, breaking things, he knew he was being invited to leave the woods. He jumps up, throws his sleeping bag, grabs his firearms, runs over the fire, and sleeps in town at the gas station. He said it scared him to death.
Wow.
If you know my husband, you know he's not scared of anything. He's actually my dad's best friend, or they're best friends, and my dad's a state narcotics law enforcement officer, retired. And so he would tell me the story, and we couldn't figure out what he was talking, or, you know, I'm like, what animals are in Texas that would be doing something like that? This went on for 25 years, for me and him visiting, you know, once a month about it on the couch on a Sunday.
Sure.
And finally I said, are you talking about Bigfoot? And he goes, yeah, I just didn't want you to think I was crazy. From that moment on, I knew he's not a liar. You know, I know my husband, I've known him all my life. And I was on a mission. So I dived deep into the internet because our children were grown and gone by then pretty much. So, and I wasn't really working a lot. So I just get on the internet and start looking up Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Everything I can find. It led me down rabbit holes of YouTube channels. Sure. And I was watching all this stuff, and I'm like, Don, look at this. I mean, they're saying they talk. They're saying all these things. And one thing I noticed was people would say, yeah, we found Bigfoot evidence. We have some hair. And they'd have holding it in their bare hands. And I would just say things like, well, just lick it then, you know.
Yeah. At that point,
it, you know. And just the more I read, the more I didn't believe. I believed my husband. I believed in the Patterson-Gimlin film. I remember that as a child. And I thought, I have got to find out what's going on. So being from a law enforcement family, I thought, oh, my goodness, my parents are going to, I don't want to embarrass anybody. What should I do? And I thought, wildlife DNA kit. Because the point is not, I'm trying to go out and discount everything possible first.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Even
Bigfoot
recently,
last.
even recently working with targeted individuals, things like that. I've invested in a crazy panoply of RF gear, infrared, thermal.
Right.
And it freaks them out whenever I bring out a radiation detector.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's any gamma waves going on. You may have a fault line running under your house. Do you have, a gas leak in your house? Are you experiencing something like the Great Oracle of Delphi right now, where you're just having slight hallucinations? We're going to find out all of the quantitatives that we can eliminate to leave the anomaly.
Exactly. And so that led me to creating my own look, because I thought, knocking on trees and doing calls and stuff is cool, but stories are stories.
Sure.
They're great, but we got to do better. Because I was on a mission at this point to prove my husband was right. I knew he was right, but it was important to me. I don't know why, but it just became this passion of mine, and hundreds of thousands of dollars later. But I don't know. This is something that I was really adamant about, finding better tools.
Yeah.
And better evidence, if any evidence. We've got circumstantial evidence. We've got stories. We've got a lot of things.
Well, especially coming from a family with law enforcement in the background.
Yes.
There's one thing to your hearsay evidence. And all important, but we also know that eyewitnesses can't be depended on in court.
No,
they are not admissible.
Exactly.
You can come in and tell your story, but is it going to weigh in as heavily as a bloodied piece of rag or something like that, or a weapon with fingerprints on it? No, absolutely not.
So I get invited to the Olympic Project.
Oh.
And
explain to the audience what the Olympic Project is.
They're a group out of on the peninsula that work in the Sasquatch field. They're well known, and they just have a sense of logic to them. They were created by a gentleman named Derek Randalls and another gentleman that was a law enforcement officer who's no longer involved because he's just out of Sasquatch stuff altogether. Good guy. But they're kind of considered the epitome of long-term good research, good audio people. Anyway, I was doing a podcast at the time about wildlife behavior because with Shane Corson, who is part of the Olympic Project, and he invited me to come up. So I think to myself, okay, I'm a Southern girl. I get invited to the Olympic Project. And I had met Adam Davies there as well. And I'm thinking, Southern girls got to bring a gift. You don't just show up at someone's home without a thank you gift, right? Yeah. So I go and I start researching, the forensic field, the medical field, about a little wildlife DNA kit for myself.
Sure.
Well, what can I take? Oh, I know. I can take a bunch of these wildlife kits. I can make a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Right? What that taught me was it tells everybody who you are. It also tells me who you are.
Yeah.
Because when I handed these wildlife kits over to every member of the Olympic Project, they were like, wow, sit down, tell us what this is and show us.
Yeah.
They were
how can we actively utilize this in what we're doing?
Yes. So then they invited me to be a part of the Olympic Project. But I also would give these to people that would invite me to expeditions because I wanted to know what these people were like.
Oh, sure. That's an immediate litmus test right there.
Yes.
Like, okay, well, how do I use these swabs?
Well, there were
things like
groups that I would give them the same kit, and they were like, oh, cool.
Yeah,
chunk it
exactly.
in the car.
Exactly.
So that right there was telling me who you are, and I'm telling you who I am. And I think that's what the Olympic Project saw immediately.
Sure.
So from that point on, I just started getting better at making better kits and providing more things like eDNA comes along, using better dry swabs.
Yeah.
Well, then last year, let's jump up 7-8 years or however long it's been. I think I've revamped that kit 9 times.
Wow.
I just want it better. I want
and that
better
technology
tools.
changes annually.
Well, this
if not more
genre
regularly.
has no real tools that people can grasp at a low cost. Thermal's expensive.
Yeah.
Audio recorders. When you start traveling and piling on all of the equipment that we think are going to give us something fantastic,
the
you're
edge.
still spending, a house payment.
Yeah.
So to me, I felt like, and this was the other thing, citizen science became a really big deal for me because what I realized was what I was doing was considered citizen science.
Oh, absolutely.
And I became very aware at this conference a few years back when Dr. Melder, I spoke the first day, and I spoke about DNA collection, but also nature journaling and wildlife tracking because I'm a certified wildlife tracker.
Oh,
level
absolutely.
2, which is recognized all over the world, but I'm certified in the state of Texas. But this is about morphology, behavior,
absolutely,
all of those things. But anybody can do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to read and write to do these things that I'm handing over. It's old world stuff.
Sure.
Go get back to the basics.
Yeah.
Lewis and Clark.
Even nowadays, because I am not an incredible note taker. However, with today's technology and your cell phone, you could quite literally Captain Kirk it and then transcribe it.
Absolutely.
Like right there on your mobile device.
So like on my audio recorders, I put out 3 or 4 every night, same time. My brain knows it's 6:30 no matter what month it is or how dark or light. I got to put out 3 recorders at least, 2 thermals, and I'm working on thermal work intensely right now. We can talk about that later because I'm going into some really weird stuff. But anyway, the kids and citizen science. So journaling, if you don't like to write down or use your phone, but you like to doodle and draw. So what I'm doing now is journaling tree structures. Because do we really know if they're doing these? Because no one's ever seen a Sasquatch make a tree structure.
Yeah.
I don't know of any Native American stories.
Have we found a lot of evidence surrounding tree structures?
No.
Fur tracks?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
It's stories.
And
so what if you sit down and you journal your tree structures? Because in the law of journaling, which is how Lewis and Clark came to this country, journaled all the species, you're starting to see details.
Yeah.
So what that does is you ask 3 different questions. What does it remind you of? Now I can't remember because we're on. But you're asking these 3 different questions of this tree structure. Then you start going down rabbit holes of, okay, what kind of wood are these trees? Is it all the same wood? Is it a certain type of pine? Then you start looking into, well, wait, now how long does it take for white pine to degrade versus cedar
elm,
wood?
ash, whatever,
Right. How big is the base of this thing? You're doing all the measurements.
Yeah, would it be that they were all put there at the same time? Would it be that they were all harvested at the same time?
When was the last flood here?
Yeah.
Now you're going down these rabbit holes of details that you aren't looking at. You were just walking around going, look, no human can make that because it's so big. Now you're seeing tiny details that are educating your mind about what these things are made of and possibly how else were they made.
Well, and even to go through and sketch them.
But you are sketching. So what I'm doing, because I don't give really any value to Sasquatch creating these structures, so I'm journaling them. And in 10 years, let's say they get evidence of Sasquatch through my DNA kits.
Sure.
And they say they do build them or they don't. I have a 10-year book.
Yeah.
of my data
compendium that you can
hand over.
Exactly.
Do you see? Everybody could do something. They're just, the thing is, quit listening to other Bigfoot people.
Yes.
We are not qualified. Go ask the experts outside.
Yes.
That are qualified in your field.
But what we can do, and what's done regularly, and for those of you out there putting the poo-poo on citizen science, I present to you Comet Hale-Bopp. Like we regularly have astronomic bodies found by backyard astronomers.
Well, that's the whole deal.
And the other astronomers, like, literally, that's their job, Jack, is to find new astronomic bodies. But this dude found it in his backyard.
Wasn't there a case of that where they were working on something for 25 years?
Yeah.
And they just handed it over and it took 2 weeks?
Yeah. Because you can get very myopic in what you're doing. Even we were having the conversation with Jason and with Ryan Edwards earlier about evidence gathering. I did quite a bit of paranormal research back in my day, things like that, and we never looked at footage. Like days later, like a week later, we would get together and you bring your footage and I'll bring mine and everything else. But we never looked at it on site. You are adrenalized.
Right.
You're in an information zone of gathering and experiencing that you really need to be heightened and aware of, and need to not put that situation on the evidence that you're gathering.
Right.
Because, you're there for a reason. You're there for a purpose, and that could get very easily clouded when you are looking at evidence and not looking at it dispassionately.
That's right. That is why I work alone. People ask me all the time, why are you in the woods all by yourself all the time? And, I mean, not every moment. I have, I do expeditions.
But in actual observation.
I work primarily alone because I don't want anyone clouding my thought process on what I'm collecting on a daily.
Yeah.
Because I'm putting out thermals every day and I'm putting out audio every day. And I need more than one thing. When you get a lot of people together in a situation, no matter how logical they are, many times it's a mob mentality.
Yep. And the mob rules.
Did you hear that?
And the mob rules.
Oh, my gosh. God. And then it goes.
And we were talking about that, Ryan and I, just before you came on, about EVPs. And, does it sound like it says this? Well, you've already laid the groundwork for it to sound like that.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's not a, hey, listen to this. Do you hear anything? Or even, hey, listen to this.
Just
listen to it.
Exactly.
Not even, do you hear anything? Because even then, you are leading and prompting. And I guarantee you, folks, the day you're on the other side of an interrogation table from a detective, you'll be happy for somebody not leading and prompting.
Well, what I do.
Because that's what they do to get you
to say
literally into what they want to say is prompt you to give them the response that they're looking for. So you really have to be
some really hardcore interrogations.
I'll bet. But you've got to be careful with what you gather, how you gather it. I was making the joke earlier while you were giving your presentation of, never dawned on me, but if I get a hair, I'm going to cut it in half and send half of it to 23andMe.
I just got a question about that to an individual, and they
we
said,
hate to tell you, but you are related to a dog.
They're just going to take your money. And
you're related to a dog.
Yeah.
Which, hey, if it comes back candid, cool. We know it's a dog.
Right.
But at the same token, we are right now at the point of just speaking of 23andMe. If you went out and had your data done right now, 5 years from now, you'd go, and it's 180 degrees. And there's been more than one case of that where someone's like, oh, I found out I had this bloodline. And then they went back and had it done differently. Well, it's not just about the money. It's about the fact of we just found new allele groups. We just narrowed down Mongolian bloodlines, things like that. So,
but private organizations, and I'm telling you, I just had a conversation with a geneticist last week. He's like, this.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, 20 years ago on crime shows, you see them saying, oh, we went back and found a spot of blood under a baseboard and they were able to separate, oh, it was this guy and this girl mixed together. I wouldn't, if me and my sister, who have the same parents, sent in our DNA, it would come up completely different.
Yeah.
So I have no interest in those type of organizations. I think it's going to get better, and I think, like you said, it's always getting better.
Yeah. The science is always getting more accurate.
Yes. I think one day, even though they tell us they can't do it, but I think one day they will be able to pull DNA from hair.
Oh, yeah.
And they can't, but I think they will.
Not as of yet.
No.
But it comes from a follicle, and there's.
Well, the follicle, I'm thinking even more than that, because if you go from 500,000 genomes to 5 billion genomes in a short period of time.
Oh, absolutely.
There's tons of stuff I think they're going to find out.
Oh, and that's what I'm saying. Those bounds are expanding annually.
And honestly,
by leaps and bounds.
I'm not qualified to even talk about this. That's not my area.
I say it on the show all the time. I went to school for 8 years. I hold no degree.
Right.
I've just read a lot of books and seen a lot of shows. And,
right. But my goal in life, for me, and my passion in Sasquatch, with things like Alba Vernex, the wildlife DNA kits, is to pass along to regular folks like myself, because we're 90% of the Sasquatch world.
Oh, absolutely.
We're just average Joes.
Yeah.
To pass on some kind of little idea that maybe they can pick up on and expand upon it.
Well, sure.
DNA kits are not a brand new thing.
No.
At all, right? But I try to afford people to get them at a much lower cost, and how to properly collect it. I've done a lot of work, and I feel good about that. The Alba Vernex was just a happenstance of me doing just my little job.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's, Sasquatch or human, but what we figured out is we have a new tool. And the Alba Vernex thing with Doug Hychek, from Monster Quest, contacts me. It was like, this is fantastic, Shelly. The white waxy stuff is so thick, and it etches into glass and plastic. They're finding the prints.
Oh, wow.
And then he's doing this work where he's comparing compounds from our sebum to other primate sebum, because we don't have hair.
Yeah.
Other primates do, and he found out that there's one less compound in our sebum compared to other primates. So that right there isn't having to DNA test.
That's right.
That's a whole nother exciting
But even getting to the point where, if, like you said, if DNA could be pulled from hair,
if it could,
at some point,
say they can't.
There's nothing saying that we wouldn't be able to pull DNA from hand oil prints, face oil prints, things like that.
Oh, yeah, there's DNA in that.
Absolutely.
We know that.
Exactly.
So, yes, that was what I felt so dumb, because it was like, all these years you get people saying, get the dermal ridges, get the handprint. We see reports of handprints on doors and windows. We never thought
considered about
the
residual.
Yes.
Never thought about residual evidence.
And here we are today.
And that's within the last year and a half, 2 years.
In the last year.
Yeah.
Because it was this time last year when Michael Waldy and Logan Kraft went out. They got the window, and we pulled that DNA. And Cliff still has it. But it was hilarious because I just felt so dumb. But
I find it interesting, though, that and perhaps it's just because it would be surface DNA and not in the core follicle of the hair itself.
But they could.
Because it's on my hand, it's on my arm, you would think that it would be on the hair that comes out of the arm.
Maybe, yeah.
You
never know.
But even being able to look for that on the hairs, now that you know what that is and what you're looking for, that gives a whole new set of data.
Well, eDNA
to examine things with.
eDNA. If you see a Sasquatch standing behind a tree, whether you get a picture of it or not, we would love for you to get a video.
Sure.
You can walk over and scoop up that dirt.
Oh, absolutely.
And send it in, and now they can.
Yeah, they aren't wearing shoes.
They can get it from water.
Yep.
They now have DNA kits that you can take into the field and find what are those snakes in Florida that are pythons?
Anacondas?
Not anacondas.
Pythons.
I think it's pythons. They just scoop up the water, test it right there, and they know if the pythons have been in that water.
Yeah.
They are working now on air DNA.
That disturbs me on so many levels.
I know, right?
For those of you who tune into the show regularly, my brain just went utter fractal.
It went
real
man,
quick.
didn't it? It went man. Man-child is where it went.
Ooh, yeah.
But that's what Doug and I were discussing. So Alba vernix was born out of basically the white waxy residue. Because when we were pulling that off of with our swabs off of the glass, it's very viscous. And so getting it off, it just seemed, like compared. So, like, let's say our sweat and our oils are kind of baby oilish. This seemed more like Vaseline, thickness, like heavy.
Almost fatty.
Yes, more fatty. And so that's where the word Alba vernix came from, white, waxy coating, covering, protectant. Alba meaning white. Vernix is basically what babies are covered with when they're born. But that's all I could come up with, but it works. The point of that is to get the word out, because we get reports of people finding handprints.
Yep.
And if you can collect that with any kind of knowledge.
How would somebody go about collecting a handprint off a window? If they're out camping, things like that, they find one that pops up on their truck window, something like that.
The thing I always tell people is wipe your windows down with some alcohol before you go to bed. Because most of the time, these handprints are very much human handprints that were there. You weren't seeing them until
popped
the dust
up with a temperature differentiation, something like that.
Right. But if you feel like you've got something going on in your area, I know in Washington area where I go, a lot of people sleep in their cars. They all drive Subarus because they're all-wheel drive and they get wherever they want to be.
Yeah, and you can sleep in the back.
Right. There's a lot of pushing and rocking on vehicles, a lot. So do you feel that there's going to have something in your area? Just wipe it down with alcohol.
Yeah.
Right?
Preferably, folks, 91%.
There you go.
Minimum.
Or denatured, whatever you
got.
Well,
yeah, because, 70%'s all right, but that's still like 30% water, so you could still be smearing quite a bit of that.
Just wipe it down really well, even if it's with a dry paper towel. If there's going to be a hand smudge on there, you wipe it with a paper towel, it ain't going to look too much like a hand smudge. You know what I mean? But anyway, collecting the handprints and face prints is basically the same as what you're watching on any crime show. In my kits, I provide large laminates. I provide tape on scale. We want forensic scale.
Yes.
Super important. Super important. Listen to me. Tape on scale and practice, practice, practice.
Well, and even if you're taking a picture, it's something that we talk about regularly on the show. Don't get crazy. Don't try to zoom in your camera.
No.
Take a if you can video, awesome.
Video.
But even just taking a still picture, try to get as wide of an angle as you can, so that you have
100 of
you
them.
You have trees, rocks, things that you can compare size to, that you can go back, you can measure. But if you've got just a zoomed in picture, you can't tell the surroundings. So how are you going to find the exact spot?
Right. And that's why I provide those forensic sticky scales.
Exactly.
Because you're gonna dust it like a butterfly's wings touching, the butterfly kiss. That's how I try to explain it. That's your touch with your carbon, which is all included in these kits. But we're only going to go into the cap. We want the minimal we can get. And we're going to kiss that print in layers. Tons of patience in anything we're doing.
Yeah.
After you see your visual, also a black light will help you to pick up prints and other biological fluids.
Any specific wavelength? Not just like a black light from
Amazon has quite a few that are meant to pick up
biological
material. I've got the really super big, powerful one, and I think I paid $50 for it.
Yeah.
But you can buy $8 ones too, and they work fine.
Yeah.
those are going to be a little more helpful for other biological things, but they do help a little bit in your prints. But either way, if you think it might be, go ahead and cast it.
Yeah.
Go ahead and take it.
That's it.
Because that's practice.
Well, yeah.
Right? So we're going to take our laminate, pull the white off the back, lay it just like you're applying a sticker to your windshield, or smooth it down. Then we're going to pull it back off and put it back on that white piece of paper. Then we're going to take those strips of forensic tape off and put those on the print. So now you have the print and your scale, everything that you can send off with any DNA you possibly find, hair, eDNA.
Where would you recommend people, because obviously not 23andMe, where would you recommend people send their DNA?
Well,
for analysis?
I mean, of course, this is the question of the year, right?
Sure.
Because it's money.
It's
money.
It is. I mean, at a minimum, at a cheap lab, you're looking $500 to $1,000 for a sample.
$5,000.
And that's, I mean, that's cursory.
$5,000.
Cursory stuff.
Yeah.
So
I've looked into it a bit. Previous years, I kind of gave up on it. But first of all, you're going to collect at least 4 samples of DNA. I provide you with 4 swabs. You're going to coat all of them so that you can send them out to wherever you need to and keep them for yourself.
Yes.
I would, as far as DNA labs, the private labs, a lot of them are government controlled in a sense of they want to speak to their panel of people before they accept anything you have, plus your money. Colleges, same thing. And this is primarily wildlife DNA labs I'm talking about because that's pennies on the dollar compared to
human DNA lab,
And we're speaking of things that live in the woods, so why not stick with that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, because once again, it's pretty easy to tell if it's human.
Yeah.
However, what you're trying to do is exclude every piece of wildlife that you can possibly exclude from the equation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they can tell now.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about cross-contamination anymore. You know, those kids, when I talk to these fine people, I make those kids as sterile and overdone as possible because people are in fear that they're going to do something wrong or they're going to contaminate
not a forensic
and that's
forensic
okay.
scientist.
That's okay. But nowadays they know human is human, and there's no cross-contamination in that sense anymore because we have so many genomes once again. And so, but still, overdoing it is fine. You know, more precautions.
It's better to have more data than less data,
Absolutely, 1,000%.
Especially as things progress technologically, things like that. You may be gathering data that may not be able to be even scientifically properly examined for a good 3-4 years.
Exactly.
You know, and with that in mind, especially with I live in Austin. We have had a huge case over the last 5-6 years of DNA evidence for crimes, specifically sexual crimes, going bye-bye.
Oh, yeah.
They had a huge issue with their cold. They had a huge issue with their storage condition, things like that, and all of this DNA evidence was viably corrupted.
Yes.
How does somebody go about storing this evidence until the point that they can get it examined?
Well, cool, dry places are the best.
Yeah.
So, like the swabs I provide.
No light, preferably.
Yeah, you don't want it in the sun.
Yeah.
You don't want it in the heat. You do not want it. So, if you're collecting, let's say, wet specimens like blood or saliva, you want to set it out and let it dry. And these are dry transportation swabs. So they have a substance in there, a stabilizer, to keep them from growing mold or anything that's going to degrade or ruin the sample. This, once again, is why we collect more than one. Let's collect as many as we can. If you want to go buy more sterile swabs, do it, you know. But personally, if I collected some DNA, I would send it to Dr. Meldrum, Cliff Barackman. I keep one for myself. Probably send one to my own doctor who knows what I do. He would help me.
Yeah.
You know, sending it out to as many people as you could, but cool and dry. You know, some people say freezer. Some people, I think if you just keep it from degrading and collecting mold and moisture.
Yeah, because if you're trying to freeze it, you got to have a whole different process, Jack. I mean, feel free to check out the fish in your freezer. If it's got crystals on it, you probably don't want to keep your sample there because you will be corrupting it.
Right. So as many samples as you can get, sending out to as many people you trust, and try. You know, I mean, I'm not the end all. Google it.
Yeah,
you know, like I said, I'm not super qualified.
How you learned a lot of it, I'm sure.
That's how I learned most of it.
Yeah.
I just started Googling and calling people and talking to people in the fields that knew what they were talking about. You know, the coolest thing is at these events, what I do is kind of boring to people. I think it's super fun.
From the full room in there, I would beg to differ.
But it was the first one of the day, so it's always full. But they want stories and things, and that's great and wonderful. But I always get that one biologist or law enforcement officer or doctor that's hiding in the corner who's had an encounter and comes over and says, hey, give me a call. I loved what you had to say. I want to help if I can. That's a success for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even though I would love to reach the Bigfoot community per se, I'm not here to change minds.
Yeah.
I'm here to set a standard for incoming new people and the youth of tomorrow. Young kids are my best audience, and they think differently than we do.
Yes. Yes.
They ask the best questions.
They'll challenge you.
They're awesome.
They got no problem challenging what you just had to say.
But they give me better ideas.
Oh, absolutely.
Those are the people I'm focused on. Anybody that, you know, and citizen science is where it's at. And that was all made of light to me a couple years ago when I opened the conference, as I always do. And Dr. Meldrum was the last speaker of the day. And he says, first of all, we need to give recognition to Shelly Covington-Montana. Because if you want to know what citizen science is, she's doing it. And I was absolutely floored.
Yeah.
I've always thought if I could just get one scientist's attention, I might be doing it correctly.
Yeah.
Or kind of.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, it's become a trend now that I've been seeing where even colleges and wildlife departments are literally reaching out to their neighborhood squatchers, things like that, because you're out in places that they aren't studying. You're out in places where they don't have money to study, but you have trail cams.
Yeah.
So they've actively been outsourcing this stuff to Sasquatch groups because you're gathering invaluable data, whether it's a Sasquatch or not. Wildlife-wise, you are out there gathering invaluable data that they do not have the time or money or manpower to gather.
That's
so
exactly what citizen
science is so utterly important.
They use us, and we're happy to be used.
Yes.
That is
how the proper cooperation, the way it should be.
Well, and this is how I got my certification as a wildlife tracker. I went in. I'd always done a little tracking per se, identifying tracks.
Sure.
But I looked into citizen science. I Googled citizen science, and a group called citsci.org pops up. And they have the certification called Cyber Tracker.
Cool.
Associated with them. So I go in and I read all about that. This is a program that was created by a gentleman who realized and recognized that wildlife tracking was a dying art and a dying science, because it's probably one of the first sciences.
Probably the first science.
First. Because, you know.
You had to find food, man.
Right, and we needed to follow predators who were killing their prey, and we would scavenge.
Yeah.
Well, how do we follow them and figure out where they're going? We have to learn their behaviors and morphology and tracking them.
Yeah.
So they're associated. It's called Cyber Tracker. And what this program is for anybody, because this gentleman went over to Africa and learned from the last real trackers who live that way, who provide their food that way. They can't read and write. But we need to learn from them to keep this alive, but to help with poaching.
Yep. Yeah.
So he learns from them for years and years, but he realizes he can't help them with the poaching issue if they can't read and write in the sense of recording data. So they create this cyber unit where they just use icons that these people can use for their poaching issues.
Cool.
And conservation and counting, you know, species and numbers. Because we know in all regions of the world in conservation, they don't go and count how many cougars are in the area. They count the tracks. Yeah. And they learn the tracks of individuals. That's how we get numbers. Yeah. So they brought the program back to the United States and implemented it all over the world, because you can be a 5th grader. You don't have to read or write. Yeah. But you can help with conservation and
I learned basic tracks when I was about 7, 8 years old. When I was old enough to tote a shotgun with my grandfather. Right. I learned how to identify a bunny track and a deer and things like that.
Sure. So I was really interested because this is citizen science. This is going to help me once again with that. Go back to eliminating all species. Yeah. Bigfoot last. So I go and I get really in depth with this, and I want to find a certification class for myself. So I find one in Austin, Texas. I sign up for it. Awesome. The people tell me we're only taking 10 people a year to certify. You will fail. And I was like, what? And they said, this program is not, we don't teach you about tracking. You have to come and show us you know about tracking. All wildlife biologists, all game wardens fail the first time. You will fail. And I said, no, I won't.
I bet I won't.
So I get on the internet and I search down a certified cyber specialist of North America and Africa. And he works with me for 9 months intense. I go to take my certification. Everybody there had just been through a on-site wildlife school for 9 months with a certified tracker. I'm the one that's going to fail. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. It was 2 days in the field. They didn't know what they were going to find, but they would do like anything from insects all the way up to big animals, birds, all of this. You know, the hardest thing I had to do was identify snail poop. You know, walking stick tracks. All those things. I mean, remember my mentor says, Shelly, you need to learn about rodent skulls, because if they find an owl, they're going to break it a pellet because certain owls eat certain rodents.
Absolutely.
Those are all important things. Anyway, second day, I get a level 2.
Nice.
So citizen science are things that people already say they do. Oh, I'm a tracker. I'm a hunter. Yeah. Go get certified.
Absolutely.
Because the guy that gave me my test is the head of the endangered species biologist for the state of Texas. Wow. And he's a specialist. And he promotes this program for everybody.
Too cool.
So I encourage citizen science so much because it's fun. You are actually adding to things you care about, because I know people that love Bigfoot love all wildlife. Yeah. And you're going to learn so much by opening that mind, getting into those details, practice. Yep. And so I could talk forever and ever.
Well,
sorry.
Before we do, let everybody know where they can go to keep up with the latest from Shelly Covington-Montana, where they can go to purchase test kits, all that kind of good stuff.
Okay. Honestly, I don't put a lot online anymore, but I will tell you, if you contact me through my Facebook page, which is simply Shelly Covington-Montana Messenger, I can usually get back with people. I mean, that's my biggest social media page. You can also contact me through Instagram. I think it's Crypto Chick.
Okay.
Yeah. But Facebook's the easiest.
All right.
And if I don't get back with people immediately, it's because I'm in the field, but I will get to you. Well. Contact me if you want a kit. I encourage people, if they can't be at one of these places and buy one, I can surely help you put one together if you'd like, or you can purchase them from me for $65.
Awesome. So. Well, thank you so much for your time on this very busy Texas Bigfoot Festival. While you are online, finding Shelly Covington-Montana and following her and keeping track of everything that she is doing out in the field tracking, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. That is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can find our experiencer form, where you can upload your own evidence. Right after this commercial break, we will be coming back with more coverage of the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, the Bigfoot capital of Texas. Right after this, folks.
Sorry if I got off track.
No, you're good. The one thing I do with my
With the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25-milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com and the code is CURIOUS7. The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, the Bigfoot Capital of Texas. We have with us researcher and author Adam Davies. How are you doing? Welcome
I'm very
to the show.
good. Thank you so much.
I thoroughly enjoyed your, I guess it was a kind of a loose presentation talk last night about how you go about researching, about some of your research adventures. It was more than some harrowing tales that you had, especially about the tigers and all that kind of stuff. How did you get into the world of researching cryptozoology to begin with?
Well, it was a gradual progression. So, in synopsis, I'll try and be as brief as I can.
Sure.
I had a sister that died of neuroblastoma, which is a form of cancer, when she was very young, and that taught me you never know when you're going to go. Yeah. And when I was older, slightly older, I was only 8 or 9 years old, I got hit by a motorbike that was driving illegally on a sidewalk.
Oh, wow.
They told me I'd never walk again, and I was determined to walk again. So after a year or so, I became my city swim champion. So I knew I had lots of determination. I'd always loved to go outdoors and do research, and I was interested in the adventure aspect, the phenomenon of unexplored creatures. So I did survival courses, things like that. So it was a gradual progression, got to know my local woods, and then explored from there. So it's always been a childhood dream shaped by some rather unpleasant experiences when I was a kid, which moved me towards those and doing what I enjoy.
Okay, yeah, and it's beautiful that you were moved in that way to realize that if you wanted to do something you enjoyed, that you needed to hop on train and get moving with that. So many people, I think, are discouraged from doing such things. How did your parents feel about that?
Well, I remember somebody talking about me once saying, you've got my first book there, somebody there saying, oh, I really enjoyed his first book, I hope he survives long enough to write another one. And my mother was like, you see what that man said?
Yeah. That's why I didn't buy you a motorcycle.
But now I've written 3 expedition books and 2 novels. I know I've danced with death quite a lot, but I'm still here, so it's been all right.
I mean, you were bit by a black mamba.
Well, I wasn't bitten by it. I was chased by one in Kenya. I've had some serious encounters with animals. Yeah, obviously tigers in Sumatra, which you mentioned because you heard me talking last night.
Absolutely.
Big poisonous spider attacked me in Mongolia. There's an elephant in Kenya as well. There's a few things that's had a go at me, but I've never been savaged by anything other than people.
All right. Well, and with that in mind, I guess one thing that we regularly speak to Bigfoot researchers about is work out in the field. It's great to do all your research online, things like that, but when you go out in the field and you start gathering data, what is the best point to start for the average person? I mean, of course, someone such as yourself working with channels, Discovery Channel, History Channel, you have access to a lot of things that the average person out in the field may not necessarily have access to.
Well, it's a good question, but not really in the first instance. So most of my expeditions were self-financed.
Okay.
I mean, things like the Congo, there's no film company with me. I saved up to do it on my own time and my own money. And nearly everything I've done has been on my own time and my own money. When I do a film, of course, they pay for it, and that's great. But it was years before they got involved, and most of the stuff I do is what I pay for because I passionately believe in it and I enjoy it. I think the best advice I can give somebody, I mean, I do expeditions all over the world, but I do have an interest in Bigfoot. So I think the best advice I can give to somebody who is starting out is to really learn their local woods, learn the flora and fauna, do the background research, not everything, and don't be... it's not like the TV in the sense that everything is a pop and a crack and a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the stuff I do is involved an element of suffering, and it's hard field work. And there's very little substantive evidence that you find over years of research.
Yeah.
So there we are.
You really do have to be willing to accept that as well, because people forget the fact that you might see an article about a scientist and their discovery. They spent 10 years in that lab before that one single discovery happened.
Yeah.
Trying to crack that nut, spending time for it. And even for someone of your ilk and experience, and vast experience, putting out movies, books, things like that, to come out and say, don't be upset if you come back from like research trip number 25 and you still have nothing.
Well, research trip 225 and have nothing.
Yeah.
Because that's more plausible, frankly.
Sure.
If you're always going out in the woods and seeing and finding something, that's inherently suspicious.
Yeah.
And you need to
Not
have patience.
quite anomalous.
Yeah. You need to have patience. You need to do this research. And also the other thing I'd say is the standard of evidence for something like a Bigfoot has to be extremely high. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. You have to have a very high standard, and people need to know that. I mean, science would not be against you if you had evidence.
Sure.
Then it would be objectively analysed. But if you produce a blurry picture and expect the world to bow down to you,
stop.
Then you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah. If you're getting angry emails from primatologists and you have nothing but a blurry picture, that might be why.
Well, they probably just wouldn't bother looking at it.
Well, yeah. And, you really do have to get rid of that confirmation bias within your own realm and be willing to get rid of that and be willing to say, what I've heard is just something that I've heard. We were just having a conversation with Shelly Covington-Montana a minute ago about not leading somebody when you're in the field. Not looking at footage, not going through and listening to wood knock recordings. Like while you're in the field and you're in the middle of a passionate expedition, you could definitely be blinding yourself by your mission at hand instead of the evidence at hand.
Yeah, and I think, I worked for the British government doing cross-examination. So I have a postgrad in law. And in some ways the application of science and the application of law diverges, but in some ways there's a similarity, and the similarity is when you have evidence that needs to be objectively analysed. Yeah. And you're not always objectively analysing in the field. You can have this cognitive dissonance.
Absolutely.
You can have all that, So it's good. I mean, but I've been always quite broad about it in the sense that if I find something tangible, which is very rare, I'll hand that over to credible scientists to analyze that. And that's my job done. I'm not a scientist.
Absolutely.
I am what I am,
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. You have to be willing to see yourself as an evidence gatherer. That's and but once again, we were just having this conversation about the fact of science itself has started turning to citizen scientists. I mean, Hale Bopp as citizen scientists that found that. We regularly discover astronomical bodies from people in their backyard. So don't discount the fact that you are just somebody with a game camera and an audio recorder. You could literally be gathering data for your university down the road just on wildlife stuff that they don't have the time, manpower, or money to go gather. Yeah. So
exactly. And
your data is still a point of data added to a set. Or data.
Completely, providing, you're not precious about that data. And if somebody comes along and says, well, I don't think it's credible, I don't believe in it, or it's not, it's a I don't know, a coyote, you don't get all upset about it. They're analysing the data. They're not analysing your personality.
Well, yeah. And once again, that comes in treating evidence as just that. It is a point of datum in a set. Nothing more. You have to be dispassionate, even though you spent time, money, going out and gathering that. I mean, there's more than one court case that doesn't happen because they spent the time and money to gather the data, and it just doesn't come together.
Exactly.
You know, so you really have to do, A, your own due diligence, and B, be willing to be that proper parent and let it have the wings to fly. Don't hold on to it, you know. Let it go to the researchers, let it go to the other people, and whatever comes back is what comes back.
Exactly, yeah. No, I agree.
Now, when you're out, and especially out, say, on the side of a mountain in Nepal with someone like Josh Gates, how do you go about gathering that data in the field? Because, of course, typically you would have a camera crew with you, that kind of stuff. But how do you go about typically gathering data like footprints, stuff like that when you were out in the field?
It's different between when you've got a camera crew with you when you haven't got a camera crew with you. When you've got a camera crew with you, it's easy, really, because there's a lot of people there. When I found the Yeti print with Josh Gates, I basically said there was a farmer who'd had a recent sighting, and I said, you know, I want to do a trekking by a river where near the area where I speculated it might be foraging for food if there was one around, and I said, you know, I don't want a massive entourage for this.
15 people traipsing around.
Want that. Yeah, we just had me and Tule, and who was a tracker, and Josh, and I found that print there, possible print, and any data is the crew will bag and tag,
sure,
and they'll send it off if we find stuff. So that's easy. When I'm finding data myself, obviously I have specimen bags and I have DNA kits, and I'll send it off. And basically you make sure you gather the data the best you can. The big thing used to be contamination with DNA stuff. But now, as I'm sure you're aware, the science is getting better, and they can actually differentiate that contamination a lot more than they used to be able to do so. And that used to be quite frustrating because it was extremely difficult. But now it's it's easy.
To try and gather DNA evidence off of a tree or something like that out in the woods, that could be hard. Much less for a scientist, not even a citizen scientist or the average bear.
I remember there was one time with the orang pendek, and we were going in two prongs in an area where it was regularly seen and where I'd got prints before. And we heard a rustling sound, and two of the teams actually saw it. They were coming in from the right and the left. We were trying to pincer it off, and two saw it, and I was coming in from the left, unfortunately, rather than the right. That's my unfortunate luck there. But it had been chewing on rattan, and I knew it had been chewing on rattan. A lot of the eyewitnesses had talked about it chewing on rattan. And I bagged and tagged the rattan and sent it off to Todd Dissertels, and he couldn't extract the DNA with the saliva samples, which was infuriating at the time. That was the science then. I think now they probably could have done because the technology's moved on.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the fact of saving that evidence for later, there, like you said, there are numerous techniques now where you could go and pick up evidence off of something that 5-6 years ago, well, we can't get surface evidence, so let it go. Into the bin it goes, as opposed to now where it's, well, let's bag it and retag it, and we can examine it whenever new technologies come along, that kind of stuff. For you yourself, how do you go about archiving that? Do you archive?
I send it off to the scientists, and that's my job done. In terms of archiving, it's more of I write the information out and do it that way.
So photographs.
Photographs, etc. I mean, once I've handed over the samples, that's the end of my job there. And so my next work is obviously writing about the things and doing it that way.
Yeah. And with that being said, how do you move from field work to, I guess, expressing the field work to people? Because it can be a little dry sometimes. It's not every day that you have a tiger stalking you, unfortunately. But how do you go about bringing the audience into that experience?
Well, it's a different approach. I mean, I think, with my books, what I wanted to do really was write an account of the experiences I've had. And so I wrote contemporaneous notes at the time. So contemporaneous, I'll say that again, notes at the time, so that I could make sure that they were there. If there's anything tangible and scientific, I'll leave any of those to express. But I did write a note, new primate species in Sumatra, for Edge Science magazine, where I wrote a little note on that. Jeff Meldrum wrote a note about our experiences with the Yeren, Dr. Jeff Meldrum. So he wrote that, and with the cellular serpent, that was the Marine Research Institute in Bergen. So they write that. They're the scientists. I document my accounts and things like that in my books, and that's basically how I go about it. I mean, it's not. I think that the best way to get good research ultimately is a scientific paper, but as I say, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. So for me, the best way to document my experiences is to write them in books rather than put some crap on Facebook,
Yeah. It's also really hard to tag from a mountaintop in Nepal.
Almost anything's possible these days. I'll tell you, when I first went to Sumatra, I don't know how long. I've been in there 8 times, so it must be like 20 years ago or something. I remember I used to have to write letters, and then it was a phone call, and it was like, I'd phone up and then I'd ask for my chief guide, Sahar, and then somebody had phoned back. He phoned back an hour later, so I'd call him on. Then the next time, I remember coming out of the jungle, and we were exhausted, some of our clothes were ripped, and there was one TV in the village which Sahar had bought, and everyone's sat there watching SpongeBob SquarePants.
It was the only thing you could catch.
Yeah, and now, some of Sahar's kids are, and they're adults now, are Facebooking live from the jungle,
Wow.
So, technology's changed.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm black and white or something.
And you mentioned writing letters, things like that. How does one, especially outside of the bounds of the woods in their backyard, things like that, how do you start to mount an expedition? What is your first steps?
Well, it has to be 3 things. First of all, do the historical account. Are there some historical pedigree to the accounts? Do they go back a way? So my first degree was in history before I did a postgrad in law. So I look at that and I analyse that. I'm less interested personally in Chupacabra because I can't see the historical pedigree. There's an example.
Yeah, it's maybe 20 years of story.
40, whatever.
Yeah.
But with things like the Yeren in China, it goes back thousands of years. Yeah. So you see what I mean. Second thing is, can the ecosystem support it? Is there a viable ecosystem that can support a viable population of those creatures? And thirdly, how much do I want to do it because I'm financing it myself?
Yeah.
And then it's a lot of preparation. So, for example, the Mandi Barung in India, which I touched on very briefly last night, that's a year minimum of research, backwards and forwards, conversations, emails, and then permits to get into the place.
Before you even get over there with equipment, gear.
Yeah, everything. So it's a lot of work, a lot of work.
Yeah.
And But, it's been worth it. I've had a wonderful time.
And that's something really important to bring up. Even if you're talking about your local forest, things like that, if you're going into a state forest, anything, you need to make sure what your local laws are. You need to make sure that you have permits in place. Hey, if you're supposed to have a permit for a four-wheeler or to go camping or whatever, you need to make sure that you have all that in pocket before you just hop out there with a backpack full of gear.
Exactly, yeah. You need to make I mean, it's worth it. I mean, it's essential in some third world countries as well, because you will get yourself arrested if you're not on top of it.
Oh, yeah, especially parts of Africa, things like that, like beyond, like you were saying last night. You had to have active conversations with warlords in the Congo to pass over their property to go research next to a river.
And it really doesn't matter what the government says in that instance.
No.
And if the warlord decides you're not going, you're not going.
But I've got this piece of paper and it's got a seal on it.
Yeah.
I can't come through.
Whatever.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
But I got a visa. I got visas for my crew and everything.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
Yeah. Now, a while ago you were bringing up during your expedition with Josh Gates how you asked the crew to step back. Number one, was that for, I guess, to not contaminate a scene, or to also, because there had been sightings in the area, to not maybe spook something that was there?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, so both. I mean, if we're moving relatively quietly, we might see something. If there's 20 people with us, we're not going to. Yeah. And also, if people are trudging around and they're not used to tracking animals, they could easily disturb something because quite innocently they don't know what they're looking at.
Yeah.
So it's both of those things.
Well, and what are some of the things that you should be looking at when tracking, especially going through woods, things like that?
Well, obviously you're looking for recent signage if possible, so things like breaks in the wood, anything anomalous, flattened grass, plants, things like that. You're looking on the ground for prints. And making sure you know the difference between, say, a dog and, I don't know, a bear, yeah?
Sure.
So looking at those, but also look up, because I theorize, I've seen gorillas in the wild and orangs, and with Bigfoot, I theorize that they may well be in the trees to a large extent. So often we're looking on the floor, or we look horizontally, because that's how human beings are, but look up as well. You never know.
Interesting. Now, have you ever yourself had a Bigfoot experience?
I've never seen a Bigfoot, and because I've never seen a Bigfoot and had a clear sighting, I cannot be certain I have experienced Bigfoot activity. I have, of course, heard many, many wood knocks and some not really very clear howls. There was one in Vancouver Island, I think, which was very impressive, but I didn't see it do it. And I think you need to be aware that unless people will say, well, I put some food out for a big and some animal creature, it must be a Bigfoot that took it. Well, did you actually see that happen?
Yeah.
So I'm cautious because I can say, well, I've had these experiences, but unless I physically observe it and it's a really good sighting, I can't say for sure.
That is probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard a researcher say on my show.
Oh,
honestly, because you're saying that. Yes, I've had experiences. I've had experiences that are anomalous. Am I going to say that I met a Bigfoot out in the woods or that I heard a Bigfoot? No, not offhand, because I can't prove that what I heard or what I saw was a Bigfoot.
Yeah, and I think it's really important.
Yeah, well, it's massively important, because if you aren't willing to do that, and especially if you aren't willing to do that with yourself and your own experiences, it can be hard to remove that from other people's experiences. And like you were saying earlier, the experience is where it starts. You're not going into an area where experiences have not been happening for more than decades, if not over a century, and which means, you give a lot of credence to actual experience. You give a lot of credence to local indigenous people, the fact that they live off the land, they know the land. They know when something is amiss with their livestock. Things like that.
Oh, definitely. I've spent a lot of time working with indigenous people and in North America, First Nation, Native American, depending whether it's Canada and the US. So I spent a lot of time because I've always been interested in those local legends, and I've always attached some gravitas to them, having worked with tribal people. Obviously, they're worthy of analysis. I'm not saying you to believe every local legend, but I do think that when you've heard them and they handed down for centuries, there's something worth
when
exploring.
You've got an unbroken oral tradition for 300-400 years, it's a little hard to get rid of that.
You should pay attention to it.
You should really pay attention, especially when you have tribes in the Northwest literally talking about trade with Sasquatch.
Yes,
literally,
and they do.
They treat them as another tribe on the other side of the trees.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that's important. So I think they are worthy of analysis, and you should look at them. And I have done while I've been here in relation to Bigfoot, and I'm going to talk about that as well today.
I cannot wait to hear it. Before we let you go, what was your most harrowing experience out in the field? Because of course everybody thinks it's milk and honey. You're going to go out. You're going to catch wood knocks your first night, and next thing you know, 20,000 hits on YouTube in a day, and they're coming to you for monetization, all kinds of stuff. But what was your most harrowing experience out in the field? Because it's not all sunshine and lollipops when you get out there, folks.
It's not that it's the most harrowing experience. It's the one that I remember most. So I've been shot at. I have. You heard me talk. But the one I'll always remember, and the one is and I mentioned it a little bit last night. It was when I'd come out of the Congo and of the jungle. I was in Infondo, the border town, and I was exhausted. I'd already got giardia and had my clothes were ripped, and I felt sick. And I was about to go back, and there was a guy there, a lovely man, a Dr. Joe Harvey, and he worked in the hospital there. And I think there's 100,000 people per doctor there. He could have made a lot of money working in America, but he's a greater man than I, and he chose to do that out of the goodness of his own heart. And I worked in the hospital just for a day with him, and there was no anaesthetic. It was horrendous. I was holding down a woman, helping him to do some surgery, and the guy on the other side of me had leprosy and half his face had collapsed. That's the conditions this guy's working in.
Wow.
And he asked me to send a package back to the US, and because we're right on the edge of the Civil War, and I will never forget that. In my head, every time I hear Silent Night, because we were playing he had a little organ, and he's playing Silent Night, and you hear Silent Night, Holy Night, all is calm. And I got this old Anatov out, and I just saw him, his little thing as I got out, and I thought, and I was going back to Britain for Christmas, and I thought, there's that man staying there. There's a truly good man. Yeah, I try my best, but I'm not that man. And so I think that will always be the single thing that sticks in my head most.
Wow. And what a changing experience for you. Wow. That's incredible. I can't even express that. I've been in a lot of situations, but to be in something like that and to see somebody working in that capacity, amazing. I want to thank you very much for your time today,
Oh, my
Adam.
pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Before we let you go, please do tell the audience out there where they can go to keep track of the latest work from Adam Davies. If you can tell us when your next big splash bomb from the media is coming out, please do. I know frequently they don't tell you till just before it releases.
Just before. No, I don't know. I don't know when my next big splash bomb is for exactly that reason. It's when the network tells me. They can always find me on AdamDavisExplorer.com of all mysteries, or they can see my books on Amazon, and I have a public Facebook page, so people can always follow me. It's Davis, Davies.
All right. Well, thank you once again for your time. While you are online checking out everything from Adam Davis, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. That is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can find the Knowledge Vault with all of our declassified government documents, including the document from the FBI when they examined Bigfoot hair, things like that. Really interesting story there. Stop on by and check that out, folks. We will be back with more coverage from the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, right after this. All right.
We good?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
With the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25-milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com, and the code is CURIOUS7. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com. The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas. We are so happy to welcome artist Sibylla Irwin. You were speaking earlier today at the conference about your experience as an artist. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So, I work with people who have had impossible visitations and impossible encounters, who have kind of changed the fabric of their reality. So I work to recreate what it is that they saw.
Okay.
Because an image kind of takes the place of thousands of words. You know, you can try to describe and paint a picture for people, but I actually do create that image for people.
Interesting.
So, you know, some of these images are so burned into the people's minds.
Yeah.
Even if it's 30 or 40 years, it's still
absolutely
just crystal clear.
Yes.
So they kind of impart that information. I've learned over time how to ask the right questions so that I can build that image in my mind, and then I put that on, you know, I create it for them and I send it to them, and then we just ping it back and forth. They tell me what's good and what I need to fix and we just keep tweaking it until they tell me it's perfect.
What led you into specifically this field of artwork?
Well, I became an investigator with the BFRO like in 2008. And so I found the BFRO website back in 99. And I was just like voraciously reading reports. I was absolutely fascinated. But I grew up in a house that was haunted, so I've always kind of known there was more to this reality, you know, than what we were kind of being told.
Sure.
So, and then I've always just been fascinated by stories of strange occurrences and stuff that people were seeing. And then after I became a BFRO investigator, I had an investigator from Wisconsin contact me and said, I know you're an artist. Would you be willing to, this woman found this image that looks sort of like what she saw, but this part's not right. Could you try fixing it for her? And I said, sure. So I did that, and then they kind of just kept rolling in. And then I thought it's kind of the perfect marriage of the field work that I love to do, and then also, getting to do my art skills, because I was kind of doing wildlife art before then.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask, were you doing like police sketch work or something like that?
No, I wasn't. There's only like 1 or 2 places in the United States where you can go to study that kind of forensic stuff. And I kind of looked into it for a while, but the closest one was in Florida. And at the time I was a single parent trying to raise kids, so couldn't do that. But I've been doing like photorealism wildlife art, and then I'm doing portraits too, so it's kind of this beautiful marriage of like the two. And then I discovered that it actually helped people, like some that were really traumatized. It kind of is cathartic for them.
And I can fully appreciate what you're talking about, the fact that these images live in people's minds so viscerally. I remember I was probably about 4 years old, had to have been, because we were in a trailer house in Crosby, and we weren't there when I was 5. So had to have been pre-5 years old. I distinctly remember seeing, the only way I've put it my whole life is the devil.
Wow.
Shadowy figure with horns out by the swing set outside.
Oh, that just gave me chills.
Beckoning to me through the window.
Remember
it vividly to this day in my life. I'm 47 now.
And you can see it just like it was yesterday.
I see it in my mind's eye right now. I can see the thing calling to me outside.
If you ever want me to draw it for you,
I would love to.
Really?
I would love
awesome.
to. That, and I've had a shadow being that was with me for a long time. And they can be. I remember, I am a horrible artist, but I have the best sketch that I could do of my shadow being.
I would love to see it.
And even having that, every once in a while when I run across it, there's almost a sense of relief, because there's a face to it.
Yeah.
Because I can see it. It's tangible. It's not just something that, I woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't move, and it was at the end of my bed, or it was grabbing me, things like that.
Yeah.
Seeing it now doesn't have the terror that the moment or the memory had, and it's really dulled the terror of the memory.
Yeah.
And like Lyle Blackburn was just talking in there about hunters, people who've been out for years and years, and they take big game and things like that. And when these Sasquatch come across their path or into their hunting path, they are frozen in fear.
Absolutely. I worked with a former Marine that, he says, I've been shot at. He says, I've never been as terrified. He was camping with his 2 young sons in Oklahoma. And there was enough moonlight that this thing literally just walked right up, and he could see the silhouette of it. He said, I had a pistol right next to me. He says, I was so terrified I could not move. I was literally frozen in fear. And he says, and I've been shot at before. He says, I've never experienced fear like that. He said, as soon as it walked up, he picked up his 2 boys. He threw them in the truck. They left everything.
Wow.
He put his gun and his 2 boys and the tent.
Wow.
And I know for a fact that it was there, because when we went there to this place where it happened, it was still there.
Man.
Yeah, it was there. The ice chest was gone, though, but everything else was there.
Man.
Yeah, but here's a former Marine.
Yeah.
There's not
battle
much that scares
hardened.
him. Yeah. And a police officer. I worked with a police officer too. He'd been shot at, and he didn't even see. He just suddenly, he was hunting for pigs out in his friend's land. He'd been out there hundreds of times. He said he walked to the back of his truck to relieve himself, and all of a sudden he got hit with a dread and a fear like he's never known in his life. He said, I didn't even think I was going to make it back to the door of my truck. I thought I was going to be ripped apart by something. He didn't hear anything or see anything, but the terror that he felt
Yeah.
And he got in his truck. He said, I put that gun in my lap and I got the heck out of there. He said, I didn't even relax till I was miles away on the highway.
Wow.
And so I met him, and we went out to where it was. We found an incredible stick structure that's one of my favorite to this day that I've ever seen. And we found little footprints. And so we kind of think that maybe there was mom and baby were close, and, they were telling him, you need to get out of here.
Yeah. We were talking a while ago with Adam Davies about local culture, things like that, and about stories that have persisted for a long time. And it's interesting that Native American cultures do not seek this creature out. They there are some who claim utter communication with them, that they are literally a tribe on the other side of the trees. They traded with them. Things like that.
In fact, there's stories of them doing ceremonies.
Yeah.
Like them coming
together.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some reason, we go out and seek it. And it's strange. Maybe it's that, I guess, manifest destiny part of our Western European tradition, of go forth and conquer and do these things. Where do you fall on people's experiences with Bigfoot around cities? Like, there's been a couple people I know of that have mentioned experiences in the Austin area, things like that.
And there's been people that these things have followed him home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Well, it kind of makes you wonder about whether some of these are truly physical, like the flesh and blood variety. Or,
sure.
Yeah. Or if not, because, I think they can be anywhere. I mean, there have been people who've looked out the window and they're walking down Main Street, at 2 in the morning. How do you go figure?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. And people ask me, like, why do you do this? Like, why do you put yourself in a tent and let these things walk up to you? Like, what is it in you?
Well, what is
it that makes us seek this out?
And it's one of those. Is it a morbid curiosity?
It's like for me, it's the experience.
Okay.
Like to have the experience.
Sure.
And there's just something in me that's kind of crazy, insane, I think.
Yeah.
That it's not like I like to be scared, because I don't.
But you like to experience.
But I do, and it's an adventure. And then you get to be out in nature with some of your best friends, and most of the time nothing happens.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's a wood knock or
it's a 2 to 5% situation.
Yeah. But then every once in a while, something really massive happens. And
I definitely talk on the show regularly about the fact that I've got some paranormal investigative experience with a couple of groups many, many years ago. And I guess it's the same thing. It wasn't necessarily a morbid curiosity. It was more a curiosity of wanting to know what's going on.
And wanting to experience it yourself. Because you hear about eye glow, and I wanted to experience that. Well, I did. I mean, I got to see it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've got to see it in 2008.
Well, explain to the audience what that was like.
I'd had a thermal encounter the night before in this same tree line. I mean,
Now, a thermal encounter, for those that are not aware of what that is, explain to them what a thermal encounter is.
I had an $8,000 thermal camera. I know, a thermal like XP200. But this camera has no capacity to record.
Yeah.
And the recording part didn't come in until like the next day, because this was the night before the expedition. So I didn't get to, it would have been the most incredible thermal encounter anyone's ever seen. I think this thing was just trying to figure out if I could see it. There was a guy who had crawled in his tent early, and something started throwing something at his tent. So he alerted me. I had the thermal camera. I turned it on. I walked to the corner of his tent, and I just put the thermal camera up and immediately had a really, decent heat signature.
Wow.
And which, you're not expecting that.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I didn't immediately think, oh, that's a Sasquatch. I mean, I was like, okay, so that could be a raccoon, it could be an owl, it could be a whole bunch of things. And so I just held the camera there and waited.
Sure.
And then, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes. Time kind of goes really weird when you're, But all of a sudden, here comes this thing. It just here comes the head and shoulder. I mean, I could see the head perfectly.
Wow.
And the thermal hit was so good because it was pretty close. And here comes the head, really slow, like very, very slow, leans out and is just looking at me. And I'm like, is this really happening?
Wow.
Like, you get so excited. And then, so you're wondering, okay, what's happening next? And then it just slowly went back in.
And nothing else after that.
Oh, no. And then I just kept the camera there. And here it comes out the other side. Same thing, really, really slow. And then goes back in. And then I don't see it for a while. And then, the field of vision through the camera is pretty big. Well, the next thing I know, the ground kind of dropped away behind it. Well, it just moved from that tree to the tree next to it and came up behind that tree and started the whole thing again.
Interesting.
So it just kind of peekabooing with me. And then finally, I kind of snapped my senses and I turned to the group at the campfire and said, guys, I've been watching one like this whole time. And so someone got up and came and stood behind me. And then, of course, eventually everybody's standing behind me. And so, the Sasquatch at that point was like, oh, I must be busted.
Yeah.
And then it turned and I got to see the entire profile as he walked off into the woods.
Wow.
I mean, and it was like a professional football player, like with the head was so strangely positioned on its shoulders, like it wasn't sitting on top like ours. It was really like a football player with huge pads and everything, and it just silently walked off in the woods.
Wow.
So the next night, me and Dennis Foll, Colorado investigator, are standing in the bed of a pickup, and other parts of the group were just in various places, and Dennis and I were standing there just kind of wondering if it would come back. And sure enough, and there, there's nobody shining any flashlights. We're not even using headlamps. We're just standing in the dark. Here comes this, white, two glowing white eyes. And I kind of elbowed Dennis, and I'm like, you're seeing this, right? And he goes like,
wow.
Yep, I'm seeing it. Just eye glow, like self-illuminating eyes. And so, your brain's going, how can this be? How can a biological entity have self-glowing eyes? But, there have been researchers who have actually seen that light cast on the leaves in front of the glowing. Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Crazy.
I've got to look more into that because I've definitely heard about the eye shine, things like that.
Yeah.
And that is
shine
remarkable.
And
eye glow.
Two
different
things.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, amazing. And so I think that's why you go. You go to hang out with your people that you love, because the people that are Sasquatchers, we're just kind of a unique breed of people. We love the outdoors, we love the mystery, we love the adventure, and we love being together and the discovery of, even if nothing happens, it's still a fabulous time.
Yeah, and one of the popular discussions that we have in our group on Facebook is Bigfoot real and animal or paranormal? Which camp do you fall into?
I really kind of think they're supernatural.
Okay.
I mean, I do believe that some are definitely flesh and blood, and some of them have been shot and killed, and I've worked with a couple. But I also have experienced it's like, where do you draw the line between, like, the paranormal and, I've had so many things. I mean, I have things move in my house when I was living on the habituation site. So is there a ghost in this house, or am I interacting with those guys? So I don't know. I believe that they're kind of a supernatural entity that can be physical when they want and non-physical when they don't.
Okay.
That's kind of where I fall.
Yeah, and like, once again, there are a lot of camps in the Sasquatch community.
Yes, there are.
No different than in the UFO UAP community,
right.
The paranormal community, demonology community, what have you.
So true.
And regularly, Jason Mclean and I have the conversation of Do we believe that Bigfoot is a physical animal out there, cryptid, unknown species? Yes, absolutely. When it comes to the portals and everything else, might that be something else that is living off of our emotional architecture?
Yeah.
You know, what we are familiar with, what we are comfortable with. You know, like it sees us and it feels the fact that, like, well, they would be okay with this encounter, but not with encountering me. So they use that form instead. Even that is a plausible possibility at this point. So.
And it kind of makes you wonder if there's other things out there taking the shape of a Sasquatch.
Exactly.
It's not really a Sasquatch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know, a lot of people really are in the camp that the paranormal part removes from research. I think the two kind of go hand in hand. You know, there's hard research. There's, you know, DNA, hair, footprint, everything else. But then there's the anomaly research.
Yes.
And the anomaly research is where the paranormal comes in, because you can't really discount some of that. If you're discounting that, then you're discounting a lot of
especially
modern
when
anecdotes.
You've experienced it yourself.
Yeah.
Like I've experienced that. So you know what I think is going to happen eventually is I think more and more people are going to feel comfortable coming forward and telling us more about, like they kind of half share some stuff that they're comfortable sharing, and I'm thinking and hoping that more people are going to be willing to come forward and say, you know, yes, this happened, but let me tell you about this other part that I didn't tell you about before.
Yeah.
But people are going to feel more comfortable talking about the paranormal aspect that they haven't really felt comfortable. I mean, people are still kind of warming up to the idea of being able to share their Sasquatch story. That's more mainstream now than it ever has been.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's channels on television dedicated to it now.
Yeah.
And that's something that we speak about regularly on the show, is that overwhelming emotion of shame that seems to come along with these encounters, be it UFOs, UAP, alien abduction, close encounter, what have you, paranormal experiences with the spiritual or otherwise, and with Sasquatch and other cryptids. There is a full understanding and a ridicule and very little gray area in between.
Yeah.
And we need a lot more gray.
It needs to stop.
We need a lot more gray.
Marginalizing people that have had these experiences needs to stop.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the prime examples I give regularly is we have a great community of listeners to this show and in our online community that are, quote, targeted individuals. For better than 20 years, they have been saying that they are targeted with microwave technology, other electronic means, satellite weaponry, literally the talk of crazy talk for the last 20 years, until you start hearing about Havana Syndrome and the Immaculate Concussion and our ambassadors that were hit with such weapons. So now you're investigating this, but those weapons don't exist. Okay. And if they exist to that point now, that means you've been playing with them for 20 or 30 years.
Time.
If they're handheld and can be used. So, we have to be careful how we ridicule people with their experiences, because it may seem crazy sauce right now, but that doesn't mean that 5 years from now when things happen, 5 years ago the conversation of UFOs and UAPs would have never hit the floor of Congress. 2016, you'd have heard nothing.
Right.
It took from Lou Elizondo, December 17, 2017, to now. It took till 2022 for us to 5 years. After the exposure on CNN, took a year after that for them to say, yes, this is actual footage. Yeah. This is real. We took it.
And still they're hiding so much.
And still they're hiding so much. Now, we were talking earlier with Jason Mclean about, there's a lot of people out there that think the alphabet agencies have knowledge of Sasquatch. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah. I think so too, and I think that I think there's teams of people who do occasionally have to take out.
Oh wow! Wow.
Yeah, like if a Sasquatch is killing people in an area and cannibalizing or stuff, they come in and take out the entire family because they have to once they start. I mean, humans, we're slow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah. And, I'm sure, much like a dog with a chicken, let them get a hold of one chicken, see what they do with every chicken after.
It's exactly
that
right.
may be that may be the same situation with Sasquatch. I don't know. Haven't met one yet.
I have a friend who's a researcher that was approached after one of the conferences that he spoke at, and this brother and sister approached him and said, can we speak to you privately? And they told him that their father told them on his deathbed that he was part of this team. And that's
wow.
Yeah, as he was dying, he wanted them to know.
Wow, and you hear about these deathbed confessions all the time, on numerous avenues. This is the first time that I've heard of one in that realm, and I'd love to have you on further to flesh that out and talk about that, because there really is something strange going on in our national parks, be it missing 411 or what have you, or even the people that go missing Sasquatch hunting, stuff like that. As somebody out there in the field regularly doing this research, what advice would you give our viewers and listeners who are out there and want to go out and, I guess, get squatchy with it?
Yeah. Know your area really good, and when you get to your area, like the area you're going to research, clean it up. Like with a fine-tooth comb, so that you know where everything is. Make yourself really familiar. If there's trash, pick it up and photograph if you want, or videotape, and just clean it up real good. Because what these typically do when they come in is so subtle that if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. Because they'll bring you little things, and they'll, if you're not really paying attention, you'll miss it because they're so subtle. And I think the scariest thing in the forest when you're by yourself is other human beings sometimes. Yeah. I have to, be more cautious in regards to the other human being, especially now. So many people have been kind of, homeless, and so it's a
even
drug-related
I was
stuff.
going to say, even beyond that, there are crop growers and all kinds of things out in the woods of national parks and state parks nowadays.
You have to be so careful and have some kind of satellite device.
Yeah.
Because most of the mountains you don't have cell phone service, so be sure that someone knows where you are at all times, and you can get satellite, 911 out if you need one.
Yeah.
Those little in-reach things are fantastic.
Yep. Yeah. And even I always recommend people, if they're going out and doing things like that, if you are just bringing your cell phone, make sure that last known location is enabled.
Absolutely.
Let somebody know where you're going.
I carry too.
Well, and despite what you think about 2A folks, when I was brought up hunting, things like that. If you have a sidearm, you bring it into the tree with you, because there may be pigs on the way down. And guess who ain't going to let you down?
That's exactly right.
So, there's nothing you can do against a wild animal except defend yourself.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, you really do have to be prepared for those eventualities, and you have to be ready for them. So going in uneducated, going in unprepared is dangerous.
Could be very dangerous.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you very much for the time today.
You're welcome.
Greatly appreciate being able to finally get you over here.
Yes.
Let everybody know where they can go to get sketches done, where they can go if they have an experience that they would like illustrated.
Yeah, just go to my website, SibyllaIrwin.com. Just hit the contact button, and that'll send me an email, and I'll get their email, and then I'll work in a time with them. I do not charge witnesses, so if someone's out there and wants a sketch, I'm not going to charge them for it. I don't do that. I don't believe in it. I think most people didn't ask for these experiences, and most of them, so many are traumatized. I'm not going to charge a person.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. Thank you so much for everything that you do, Sibilla, and all your research and everything that you're doing to help healing people post-encounter. Very important work. While you are online checking out all the important work of Sibilla Irwin, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. That is where you can find all the episodes, all the content. It's where you can find our knowledge vault. It's where you can find our experiencer forum. Stop on by curiousrealm.com/story. Share your experience with us. We will be right back after this commercial break to wrap up our coverage of Texas Bigfoot Conference 2022 here in Jefferson, Texas. We'll be right back after this, folks. All right.
Awesome.
That was
Sounds great. Awesome.
Oh, same here. I'd love to have you on again.
Absolutely. Just let me know.
Fantastic.
Reach out to me at
With the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25-milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com and the code is CURIOUS7. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com. The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this final part of coverage from the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, the Bigfoot Capitol of Texas. We're very happy to welcome Anne Celine. She is the host of Caravan of Lore as well as founder of KPNL Radio. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure meeting you at dinner last night, having conversation with you aside, and I really wanted to have you on. I love talking to people who it's their first time at a conference.
Yeah, yes.
Because these are experiential events, and
They
they're
really are.
different than a lot of events that I go and work. Like I work in the world of corporate AV.
Right.
These are different communities,
They
and
are.
even going from like the International Remote Viewing Association to this to other things, they're all different communities that kind of cross and commingle in different ways.
Yes.
So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
What has your experience been like over the last couple days?
I really like this. I went in 2019 to Arkansas to a paranormal expo. And then I think it was in 2021. There was a Bigfoot festival over in Washington that I went to.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, there was the Dogman conference that I went to earlier this year,
Yep.
which I absolutely loved. And so this is my very first Bigfoot convention or conference that I've been to. And it's been amazing. I am really excited to be getting to know everybody. There's that cross-pollination going
There
on.
is.
And it begins to really feel like family, which is amazing. And so, yeah, and I've heard the stories. This place, this is what really feels like everybody is telling more stories and really just connecting on that level,
Yeah.
So it's been...
That has been my experience as well, is that I akin these events a lot to Comic-Con.
Oh, I actually went to one of those for the first time this year.
I am a comic book freak. I've been going
Yeah.
to comic conventions since they were not hip back in the 90s, since before like costume contests. And yeah, to see things get to that point now.
Right.
And to know that even events like Texas Bigfoot Conference, it's like the 22nd year that this conference has been going on.
That's impressive.
And to know that it is one of the longest running cryptid conferences right here in my backyard blows my mind.
Right.
To know that this existed in my backyard for the entire time
Right.
I've been interested in cryptozoology.
That's lucky.
And, never really knew about it till I met Craig Woolheater.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's incredible. And it's nice to see these communities now, I guess, getting their foot on the corner.
Yes.
And getting some attention, garnering some attention. I think it does a lot for the research.
Yes.
So, yeah.
For the attendees, I just ended up being a speaker for the first time at the OC Paracon 2 weekends ago in California. And it was really incredible being able to stand in front of everybody and even just having a table. They come up to you and they tell you their stories.
Yep.
These are real experiences that have long-lasting effects.
Yep.
Sometimes they're traumatic and they really stay with you, and these people are searching for these answers. So when we're here, it also kind of facilitates healing, because as we tell our stories and they go, oh, wow, this person, they just went up there and they told this story, and that's similar to something that I've experienced. And then all of a sudden now they have found their voice and they can tell their story. And it's a blessing.
Well, and it's interesting because even our last guest, Sibylla Irwin, she does sketch work, things like that. And even her saying that her sketch work, the healing that she has seen it bring people, because it brings about a point of closure.
It does.
And even the experiences I've had in my life, it can be strange and it can be hard to reconcile that with your I guess, paradigm of reality.
Right.
Like capital R reality.
Yes, no, as somebody who has experienced things since my earliest memories, I published a book about it actually in February. Even with, shadow entities and ghosts, hauntings, UFO, ET stuff, when I had my Sasquatch encounter, or I like to call it that just because of the silhouette that I saw and the howls that I heard, as I stood there experiencing this, I was just shocked. And it was like my whole reality, it's like, monsters are real is what I felt, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to really wrap my head around it, even though I've been in this field.
Explain your circumstances of your encounter real quick for the audience, just so they can grasp that. We had the conversation last night.
Yes. So I was over in Ohio, and we had actually started out doing a ghost investigation. But when we were doing the Estes method, which is where you have the noise-canceling headphones and you're blindfolded and you're plugged into the SB7 and you're hearing those words that are going through and you're saying the words out loud, it kept talking about trees and land and all of that kind of thing. So, of course, I had the idea of, all right, well, let's go out to the woods and do a ghost hunt,
Sure.
Not thinking anything of it. Now, the other thing about it is, in Oregon, the forest is pretty silent. And that's just kind of how it is. And I don't know if it's just, it's so lush and everything, but over here, like in Texas or in Ohio.
Oh, we rowdy.
Oh, it's an orchestra. Oh my gosh, it's incredible. But when we got into this patch of woods, it was silent.
Wow.
And I did not register that. So when they said, hey, how you feeling? Because I am empathic. I was like, oh, I'm fine, thinking, oh, it's great. It felt still and silent. And, of course, my history is in Oregon.
Felt normal for you.
Exactly.
This is how the woods should feel.
Yep, that's right. So I was like, all right, we're good. So we set up everything. And we have a blanket down on the ground. And I'm sitting there. And I hear something off kind of behind me to my right. And it sounds like 2 bipedal footsteps. And I'm thinking, it's probably a bird. It's probably just a bird. Whatever, okay. And I sit there a little longer. And this is when I hear this really low guttural growl. And you could feel it, and it made you feel sick. But I look at the other people that I'm with, no reaction, nothing. So I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm the only one that heard it. I don't want to be the scaredy cat in the group.
Or the weirdo.
Or the weirdo.
I don't want to be the weirdo out in the middle of the woods looking for Bigfoot with a bunch of Bigfoot squatchers.
Right, exactly. I'm just like, I don't,
Wow.
So I stand up and I'm like, okay, I'm not doing this. And I stand up and I turn around because now I'm wanting to watch what's behind me. I don't want anything to, sneak up on me.
Yeah.
And I find this little flashlight and I'm looking over and I've got it pointed like this. And sure enough, off in the distance next to a tree, I see the classic silhouette where it's the head and the shoulders and the arm is around the tree.
Yeah, the peekaboo.
Yeah, and I'm going, no, you're not part of my reality. I'm not subscribing to this. No, I'm not out here for you.
Despite your paranormal experiences in your life.
Exactly. And
wow.
So I
what a denier. Seriously.
Yeah, it's true, though. I did not want that.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, though.
Yeah.
That you did not want that.
Right. Exactly. So at this point, I'm wanting to disengage. I don't want to be seeing what I'm seeing.
Wow.
So I move the flashlight over, but I'm not very far. I'm only about to hear. And that's when we hear this really loud, open-handed smack against the vehicle that we drove in on. And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. And I'm standing there frozen now. They look at me, and they go, hey, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, nope. I want to go out to the field. I can't be in the forest anymore. We got to go. And so they're like, okay, all right, Of course, they had no idea what was going on. Now, when they heard that really loud, open-handed smack against the vehicle, they're in ghost hunting mode. Normally, bangs and footsteps and moans or whatever is normal when you're in a, in a location, a building. Sure. So they laughed it off.
Yeah.
Well, we get back into the vehicle. Nothing was around there when we walked to the vehicle. And we drive out. And we get to the field, and they say, well, are you feeling better? And I said, yeah, I'm doing better. And that's when my friend that I was with takes her phone and holds it up like this. And it's the 1994 Ohio Howl recording. And she's just blurting it out to the forest. And sure enough, the exact same sound, the cadence, the length of the howl, the everything comes right back at us out of the woods. And I'm standing there, and that's the moment that I'm like, monsters do exist. That's the moment my reality was just kind of broken. And I'm just like, and then it wasn't much long after that you could hear this tree being ripped up out of the ground and smacked against another tree.
Did y'all find the tree?
No, man.
Okay.
Like we got in the vehicle.
Okay, we're out.
Yes. We got in the vehicle and we were driving off, and of course it's just like this little gator, so we all pop in. It's like a clown car. Just real slow. And and I can just visualize that it could, you hear about them bluff charging you or following you, or there's multiple, and there's strength. And I'm just visualizing this and thinking that it can come up and go like this to the vehicle and flip us over and we're snacks, And but we made it back to base camp, and I'm just like, well, I'm done. I'm a knower now. I don't need to be a believer. I feel like I'm a knower.
Yeah.
Until the second half of the experience happened. Now, what we decided to do after that, what I was thinking is, okay, can we communicate it through with the Estes method?
Okay.
And it was after a while, after I calmed down and everything, we go out, boom, Estes method again. We got the earphones, we got the blindfold, and we asked, well, at first you could hear something. There was movement. And up on the ridge, and I wasn't the only person that saw this, you could see the silhouette peeking out from a tree that was up there, but it swayed back and forth. And then one of the other people that we were with, we turned a flashlight on because we were how far can the flashlight go? What can we see? Well, that's when the person on the Estes method, now they didn't know the flashlight was on, they didn't hear it turn on, they didn't see it turn on. She says, bright, too bright. And so, boom, we turn the flashlight off. The next thing she says is, see, you see me. And we're just like perplexed,
Wow.
And then from there, the conversation began as talking about how there's something missing, something lost. And they said, we were once worshipped, but now a myth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
So then that kind of makes me go, okay, could there be two camps? Like the two camps, could they both exist? There's the people that believe that it's zoological and just flesh and blood. Then there's the people that believe it's paranormal. And then I thought, okay, well, what if it's a shapeshifter that can play off of our minds?
That is quite literally exactly the conversation that we had with Jason Mclean earlier, the one that we've had with him on previous episodes. We're both in the camp of there is a physical creature.
Right.
Unknown to science. Absolutely. But is it the fact that maybe these other entities are using what we are comfortable with?
Right.
Our known modalities of, well, if they saw me, they might freak out, but if they saw this,
yes. No, it's true. It's true. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to see over the last few years the number of UFO UAP cases that are tied in with paranormal, the number of Bigfoot and cryptid sightings that are tied in with paranormal. Used to be these were all just under the banner of paranormal.
Right.
And now it's interesting to see the factions. And to literally see the infighting between factions in these communities. the hardcore physical squatchers that are like, you're crazy with the portals, and the opposite way around.
I think that it comes down to fear.
Okay.
Because if my reality is that something could be physical, and I'm okay with something being physical, but I'm sitting there going, I don't know about all this paranormal stuff and da-da-da-da-da. And then if we were to find out that it was paranormal, that's going to kind of break your reality a little bit.
Sure.
And people don't want to go outside of that box.
Yeah.
So I think that some of it, at least, can come from that fear of not wanting that reality, that safety to be broken.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're fragile animals ourselves psychologically, and when things happen that cause you to question the world in which you live, cause you to question the way in which you have lived your life.
Yes.
At some points, even with these experiences, it can be a life-stealing moment.
Oh yeah.
For certain, and the fact of it can not only steal part of your life, but it will change the way you view and act to the world around you.
Exactly.
And how have you found your experiences to change the way you look at the world around you?
Well,
this one specifically. I mean, like you said, you are now a knower. You don't need belief. You don't need question.
Right. No, I had my experience. I know what I experienced and what I kind of saw, and with my book, the title is Aperture in the Veil, Born in a Preternatural World.
Okay.
And so I chose the word preternatural specifically because I feel that this stuff is actually very natural to our world. I don't think, when we use terms like paranormal or supernatural, I think that creates a separatism.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I'm wanting to really bring this in to be like, okay, everybody, there's so much that the human eyes can't see and so much that the human ears can't hear, but that doesn't mean that stuff isn't real or doesn't exist.
Absolutely. Otherwise, every piece of film a doctor has ever taken from me is imaginary because I can't see x-rays.
Yes, exactly.
My remote control is just a wizard in a box because I can't see infrared.
Exactly.
Just the other day, my wife was telling me about somebody in the mom's group while they were out talking about this crazy friend who believes in crystals and all that.
Oh.
And I just started cracking up.
Yep.
Because, I believe in crystals. I am surrounded by them. I have one in my pocket. And I was like, oh, that's hilariously sad and short-minded. And she's like, well, Chris, not everybody has that spiritual connection that you do. I was like, I understand that, but I'm sure she had a cell phone in her hand, right? With a liquid crystal display.
Yes.
And vibrating quartz and silicon that make the chips.
Exactly.
All of those crystals and the power of the lithium crystals that are powering the phone. So I guess all that crystal vibration stuff is just willy-nilly, not actual science. Never mind the piezo microphone that's literally a sliver of crystal between two pieces of metal, picking up your voice, and the opposite direction giving you a speaker.
Yes, exactly.
Like all powered by crystals. So pop that one in her head next time she says something.
Right.
And she did. And she was like, they all just started looking at their phones like, oh, my God.
Yeah. I love it.
It's like, here's 5 ways that literally crystals are powering your life right now.
Oh, yeah.
So forget about the willy-nilly vibration of crystals. That's a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I agree with that. And there's other things, too, like I feel that our intuition, psychic abilities, I believe that we all have it.
Yep.
It's a matter of working them out like a muscle.
Oh, sure. No, exactly. I mean, I have friends that are naturally athletic, much more athletic than I am. We both started athletics at the same time, and they just excelled more than me. They could run better. They had better coordination, things like that. I knew how to run.
Right.
I just didn't run as well as them.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true.
So,
I mean,
these things are nascent inside of us. They're there. Yeah. There's a reason why you walk into a party and you feel like somebody's tugging a string behind your belly button. Like, you need to go.
Yes.
You need to, follow that instinct. Go. Feel free to follow it. Try following it more and being in tune to that.
Oh,
now, as someone who's worked in the paranormal things like that. Before we let you go, what can people, what do you find the common person can do to, I guess, attune themselves more to that world? And that's not to say, like, inviting things.
Right.
I'm not saying go out and buy a spirit board,
no,
folks.
of course. Of course
right?
not. Right.
But, yeah, what can they do to...
I think the number one thing is to be open-minded. You have to accept the possibility that you're capable of doing this. Really open yourself up to that, that thought. And then from there, maybe write a journal that kind of keeps track of, well, I kind of had this inkling here and then it turned out to be true, or write down synchronicities, because the more aware you become, the more I think that it will build and grow.
I'm big on encouraging people to dream journal.
Oh, yes.
I do not nearly dream the way I used to. I used to be very active with my dreaming, going to sleep with intent for finding answers, things like that.
Right.
But even then, I recommend people that are trying to go down this path, start dream journaling. Start paying really close attention to your dreams, because that is quite literally where your subconscious mind gets to unwrap and unravel everything that it autonomically went through.
Oh, yes.
Throughout the day, that you literally just did not have the bandwidth to deal with at that moment.
That's right.
You tucked it away. I'm going to store this away. I can't deal with that jive right now. I got to go do this.
Yep, exactly.
But when you're asleep, you got nothing but time to jive.
That's true.
That's true. And it really does give you an insight into a lot of things.
Yes.
Here recently, I had the great opportunity to go be a sponsor at the International Remote Viewing Association.
That's amazing.
And not only there, but the International Association for Near-Death Studies.
Wow.
And it was interesting to me to see so many crossovers of researchers. Names like Hal Puthoff were mentioned. People like Robert Bigelow producing work in both areas and financing work in both areas. And it's interesting to me how everybody involved with the science, and I say science of remote viewing because, like, it's there. Like, they got the numbers. They can show you this is no random chance.
Right.
Remote viewing. It is a thing.
Yes.
But everybody involved with the founding of that, all of them particle physicists. All physicists. Every single one of them.
Wow.
And I'd followed the work of remote viewing and the Stanford Institute, SRI, things like that for years and years. But until I went there and met them and started talking to them and interviewing them and hearing them talk, it just, I never saw the letters behind the name. And it was one of those, like, wow, every single one of you is a theoretical physicist, something.
Oh, wow.
So this ain't fake.
Oh, no. See,
when you got theoretical physicists working on this, and not just working on it, but working on it over 20 years.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, remote viewing is something, I don't talk about it a whole lot, but it's something that I've definitely been interested in. I have had success. And then I did remote view Montauk once. And actually that photograph that I showed you at dinner last night, that happened shortly after my attempt to remote view into Montauk.
Oh, wow. I would love to have you on to talk about that. I've yet to do a Montauk episode, but I've been wanting to do one. So I'd love to have you on about that. I've been curious because I say it on the show all the time. To deny vibration, once again, silly and stupid. By all known physics right now, we are physically not here. This table is not here.
Right.
Me touching it is just a repulsion of electron.
Right.
Nothing more. I am sharing an electron show with a dude in Peru and another guy in Dallas right now.
Yep.
That's what we physically know of the universe and of the construction of matter.
Right.
So to know that 90% of both of us is empty space.
Yes.
But we can still high five.
I know.
That's pretty remarkable, man.
Yeah.
And really should set forth a panoply of movement in people's brains when they think about it.
That's true.
Just the fact, because once again, I know X-ray's real. Can't see it.
That's true.
I've seen the results of it.
Yes.
But I can't see the X-rays. So
right.
we need to I think lose this concept of seeing is believing.
Yes. I agree with that.
And move forward. Be a little bit more I guess proactive in how we react and act to the world around us.
Yes, I agree full-heartedly.
I want to thank you for the time. I know you have been over helping Ken Gerhardt manage his booth, things like that. Before we let you go, let the audience know, of course, where they can go to check out Caravan of Lore, where they can go to follow KPNL Radio, where they can go to get your book. It is time for shameless self-promotion.
Let's see. Gosh, so the Caravan Library of Lore is everywhere. You can find it on Instagram, Facebook, in Google. It'll be the first thing that comes up. Just type in Caravan of Lore, and you're good. KPNL Radio is the same thing. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. That one's kpnl-db.com.
Okay.
And then my book is on Amazon. It's Aperture in the Veil, Born in a Preternatural World.
Awesome. Well, I will be buying my copy of that before I leave today. I would love to have you on a full episode.
I would love that.
To talk about the writing of the book, what it's been like since writing it, and what your next moves are about
of course.
writing. So
I would love that.
Thank you so much for your time today, and I greatly appreciate it. While you are online checking out all of the amazing work of Anne Salim, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is the website. That is where you can find all of our episodes. That's where you can find all of our content. It's where you can find the Knowledge Vault full of declassified government materials. It's also where you can find our experiencer page, CuriousRealm.com/story. If you are an experiencer of the paranormal, cryptids, if you are a targeted individual, stop on by, tell us your story. We will pose your story to our experts and researchers when we have them on the show about the topic. So stop on by, check that out. You can leave anonymous invites, all that kind of good stuff. So once again, everybody, thank you so much for your time today and always. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. That is it for our coverage of the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in the Texas Bigfoot Capitol of Jefferson. So until next time, everybody, stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. All right.